Chapter 383. Under this pressure, Su Li's little face showed a flustered expression, and she quickly waved her hand. Not Dongfang. His name is Wu Xue. I was wrong. As she said, she took Jin Ying's hand and fled the place in 2 or 3 steps. You scared her. The old woman narrowed her eyes and said in a hoarse voice, Don't you want to go and have a look? These 2 girls are likely to have seen your father. Dongfang was tempted at first, but when he heard this, he immediately seemed to be splashed with cold water, and his eyes became clear. He took a deep breath and snorted. So what? I have nothing to do with him now. How can a mere trace compare to the opportunity in front of me? The old woman suddenly laughed when she heard the words, You are worth teaching. It's worth my effort to bring you here. Dongfang ignored the old woman and sat down again to rest with his eyes closed. But his heart was far less calm than it seemed. His father had been missing for decades, and he had been looking for him for decades. Some time ago, he got the news that his father had been seen in the Black Stone Forest. Old Lady Duhua happened to find him, so he came here. But he didn't expect that before he entered the cave, there was news of his father. I have to leave. If I don't come back in 10 years, don't look for me. Dongfang Yi's heart tightened when he recalled his father's resolute words when he left. His mother died in childbirth for him, and he was brought up by his father with great care. The feelings hidden under his stern face became clearer as he grew up. Although his status in the Dongfang family plummeted after his father's disappearance, and he was no different from a servant, he never had any resentment against his father. Father, where did you go? Su Li sighed deeply in her heart, and the surroundings of the tent returned to silence. Su Li took Jining back to Wang Yu's tent and took a nap. Although she left just now, she heard every word of the conversation between Dongfang Yi and the old woman. This Dongfang Yi is the son of Dongfang Wuxue, and it is not difficult to speculate that Dongfang Wuxue is missing. Su Li thought about it and contacted a lot of information. Those who entered the world in the reincarnation mirror were all the top talents in Qingshui Circle. Dongfang Wuxue was obviously a lucky person. He survived when the reincarnation mirror was broken, and he had a Taoist companion, married a wife, and had children. Dongfang Yi was not old. Based on her perception, she guessed that his bone age would not exceed 200 years. In other words, Dongfang Wuxue disappeared in the past 100 years, which had little to do with reincarnation mirror. It's a pity. If I could meet him, I might be able to find out what happened after I died through his mouth. With a trace of regret in her heart, Su Li opened her eyes and looked at the distance of nothingness. There was a trace of longing in her eyes that even she did not notice. At the same time, in a teleportation matrix of an extremely distant large region, Su Buwang looked at the names of other large regions that emerged on the formation map. He frowned tightly when he saw the name of one of the regions. Jiuzhou region? It's the place that person went back then. Thinking of this, he snorted coldly and pointed to the big region next to Jiuzhou region. Bad luck. I won't go to the place where that person has been. In the past few months, he had traveled through many big regions by the teleportation matrix, but he avoided all the places where Lingli had been. He did the same when he encountered Jiuzhou region, but he didn't know that he missed an excellent opportunity to meet the person he missed. Back to the Black Stone Forest on the 3rd day, a large number of strange Numas suddenly appeared in the bounded domain camp. Su Li sensed that there were at least 50 practitioners of Jindan realm. When did the practitioners of Jindan realm in Jiuzhou region become so worthless? Seeing Wang Yu giving an order and hurrying to the main tent of the camp, Su Li's thoughts were surging, and her expression was slightly dignified. Many of those practitioners of Jindan realm were familiar to her, but more were unfamiliar to her, and their dressing was very different from that of the practitioners of Jiuzhou region. There are practitioners of other big regions participating. This ancient cave is not as simple as I thought. Glancing at the key of divine thunder of earth lying quietly in the ring with her psychic awareness, Su Li calmed down. No matter how big the scene was, she had seen it. A cave that only affected 2 or 3 big regions was not worth her mind to be shaken. Seeing that the main tent was isolated by a layer of tactical matrix, Su Li couldn't eavesdrop, so she simply sat back in the tent and meditated. Whether it was Sueyu tactics or soul tactics, she hadn't fully understood them. If she wanted to get started before Zhuji realm, time couldn't be wasted. Seeing Su Li's action, Jining also sat aside to practice. She didn't dare to go out alone. At this time, in the main tent, beside the rough wooden long table, 11 practitioners with different expressions sat around. Wang Yu sat in the second to last position at the end, glancing at immortal Bingshu, who was sitting in the third position with his eyes closed. A trace of shock and confusion flashed in her eyes. Among the 11 people, except for her and Bingshu, they were all mighty practitioners of Yuanying realm. Why could Bingshu surpass many practitioners of Yuanying realm and sit in the third position? Glancing over the faces of other practitioners, she didn't see any questioning expression, and her heart sank. A superior position and completely unequal intelligence. It seemed that she had underestimated immortal Bingshu from the beginning. Before Wang Yu had time to think about it, the silent elder sitting in the middle of the long table glanced at everyone in the field and slowly said, "It seems that a little friend had an accident and couldn't come. Fortunately, I have made 2 preparations. Time waits for no one. Let's start now." When he said this, although no one showed any different expression, they all listened carefully, which was a response. Seeing this, the elder couldn't help but smile and said gently, "Thanks for your invitation. Since you are here, I think you should have brought the means that I have agreed with you before, right? How can I violate the agreement made with Tian Sanren?" The elder surnamed Yuan, who talked with Wang Yu at the door 2 days ago, laughed and glanced at the other 9 people present with a meaningful look. "There are 6 levels in the ancient cave, and I'm responsible for the 3rd level. I wonder who is the same as me?" The information revealed by the elder surnamed Yuan was very clear. There were 6 levels in the ancient cave, and 12 people came. That was to say, there were 2 people responsible for breaking the tactical matrix at each level. Before he finished his words, the old woman in red who brought Dongfangyi here suddenly spoke. Her hoarse and unpleasant voice made Wang Yu's eardrums hurt. "I'm also responsible for the 3rd level. Do you have any objection, Yuan?" Yuan's face changed slightly, and he smiled again in an instant. He said, "It turns out to be fellow practitioner Poisonous Flower. It's fellow practitioner Tian who arranged to break the tactical matrix. How can I have any objection?" Hearing this, the old woman in red showed a gloomy smile on her wrinkled face. "That's good." Yuan immediately got goosebumps. Without looking at the old woman again, he sat down and stopped talking. But he cursed Tian Sanren in his heart. Why did he put him in the same group with this old monster? With this precedent, the other 5 groups became extremely harmonious after they recognized each other. Anyone with some experience could see that those invited by Tian Sanren were extremely difficult to deal with. Even if they were in Jindan realm, they might be ruthless characters who didn't want to show their strength. No one wanted to offend anyone before they saw the benefits. Seeing that Bingshu and another middle-aged practitioner were in the same group and responsible for the 5th level, Wang Yu's guess was immediately confirmed. Immortal Bingshu really had direct contact with Tian Sanren, but he pretended to know nothing in front of her before. Thinking of this, she was even more afraid of Immortal Bingshu. When everyone stopped talking, Wang Yu came to her senses and found that no one was in the same group with her. She was slightly stunned and looked at the empty chair beside her. Could it be? Seeing that everyone has no objection to the grouping, I'm relieved. At this time, Heaven Rover said with a smile. Then he looked at Wang Yu and said apologetically, "Fairy Hong Yu, it seems that the 6th level of the cave can only be broken by you alone. The benefits in the 6th level will naturally be taken by you alone." Wang Yu was a little happy, but she didn't dare to show it on her face. She quickly got up and saluted, saying decisively, "It's all thanks to your care that I can come to participate in the affairs of the cave this time. You can take 30% of the treasures in the 6th level. 30%. The smile on Tian Sanren's face didn't decrease, nor did it increase. No one knew whether he was happy or angry. Wang Yu was a bit smart. Yuan, who was sitting aside, rubbed his chin and thought. He sneered in his heart. But how could a mere 30% tempt the greedy Tian Sanren? The ancient cave was originally discovered by Tian Sanren, so he knew more information about it than anyone else. Although they had a good talk now, no one knew what would happen after they entered it. Since everyone has no objection to the arrangement, then tomorrow morning, Please take your men and set off with me to go deep into the black stone forest. Tian Sanren stood up and cupped his hands. Everyone immediately got up and responded. Then the tactical matrix of the main tent was unlocked, and everyone dispersed. Suli sensed the change at the first time. She opened her eyes and saw Wang Yu return to the tent with an indifferent expression. Master, you're finally back. Jean Ying was awakened. She was relieved to see Wang Yu and behaved decently according to Su Li's instructions. Wang Yu's eyes flashed an imperceptible strange color when she heard the words. She smiled softly and said, "Have an early rest. We'll set off tomorrow morning. There are many opportunities in the cave, and even I will benefit. Whether you can go further on the road of cultivation depends on your own performance." Su Li was slightly refreshed. After waiting for so many days, it was finally time to set off. "Yes, master. I will perform well and won't let you down." Jining straightened up and promised so solemnly that she almost believed it herself. Chapter 384. In the early morning of the next day, the damp black stone forest exuded an amazing chill. As soon as Jining followed Wang Yu out of the boundary, her face was slightly pale from the cold. She quickly ran her genuine energy to get better. After seeing this, Wang Yu gave each of them a protective jade rune to isolate the chill. Before reaching the 6th level, she still needed to maintain the necessary good impression with these two little girls. Su Li took the jade rune and activated it, even though her physical body was enough to resist the chill. When Tian Sanren and other practitioners of Yuanying realm arrived, they immediately set off for their destination without any delay. Today is the day of the year when the een in the black stone forest is the heaviest, and the stone ghosts are not willing to come out. Su Li followed Wang Yu silently. Her eyes swept across the bottomless darkness in the stone forest, and a touch of thoughtfulness flashed through her eyes. After a while, Su Li withdrew her gaze and inadvertently glanced at the sallow-side face walking in front of the team who happened to turn his head. Her footsteps paused slightly and returned to normal in the blink of an eye. Except for Wang Yu next to her, no one noticed this abnormality. Another acquaintance, Su Li took a deep look at the back of the man and quickly withdrew her gaze without stopping. But she kept a thought in her mind and listed him as a key observation target. In the quiet and depressing atmosphere, everyone's pace was extremely fast, and the cultivation of Lianqi realm couldn't keep up at all. Wang Yu could only ride her sword and put Jining and Su Li on it. Half a day later, the team had gone thousands of miles deep into the stone forest. The surrounding een had reached the point where it was visible to the naked eye, and the visibility was no more than 15 feet. Even if the psychic awareness of Jindan realm had been transformed into the divine awareness, the awareness sea would be polluted by the een. "We're almost there," Tian Sanren said softly with a solemn face, for fear that the sound vibration would attract some troublesome things in the een. As soon as he said this, all the practitioners were slightly refreshed, and at the same time, they were more careful, slowed down their pace, and continued to go deeper with Tian Sanren. But after a while, the black air suddenly began to fade, and a group of irregular boulders appeared in everyone's field of vision. "It's here, exactly the same as on the map." Someone was surprised and whispered, but he soon found that he had said something wrong. He panicked and immediately shut up. But it was too late to shut up now. "Haha, this little friend actually has the map of the ancient abode. After entering this time, we're all in the same boat. Little friend, won't you take it out and share it with me?" Heaven Rover said with a smile. At the same time, the other 8 old foxes of Yuanying realm also looked at him tacitly, especially Elder Yuan, whose face was extremely gloomy. "Master, spare me. I didn't mean to hide it from you." The young man's face was full of terror. He immediately handed the yellowed roll of paper, which had become a hot potato, to Elder Yuan. The old man surnamed Yuan took it and glanced over it. Then he sneered, "Bastard, how dare you hide such a big thing from me? Are you hiding something else?" Hearing this, the young man's face changed instantly. He turned around and fled without saying a word. But how could he, a practitioner of Zhuji realm, escape from the evil hands of an old monster of Yuanying realm? Before he took 2 steps, he burst into a cloud of blood mist without warning. Jean Ying was so scared that she covered her eyes in horror and hid behind Su Li. After killing his disciple, Elder Yuan looked slightly relaxed, but he still didn't look good. He reached out and grabbed the young man's universe ring in his hand and directly threw it to Heaven Rover. After a moment of silence, he said, "I don't know what this bastard did. Heaven Rover will check his ring personally. As for the map, we'll share it with you." Heaven Rover scanned the ring with his divine awareness, and his smile reappeared. "There's nothing else in the ring. You can check it yourself." Fellow practitioner Yuan was careless this time. "You should pay more attention in the future." Hearing this, Elder Yuan forced an ugly smile and responded, "Fellow practitioner Heaven, you're right. I'll pay more attention in the future." After the matter was settled, the atmosphere suddenly relaxed. Everyone surrounded the map and looked carefully. The huge stone matrix had been found, and they could enter the cave before today. They had enough time. Elder Yuan sat aside and didn't surround them, but his heart was gloomy. It was a bad start. It would be a lie to say that he didn't feel heartache for losing a stove in vain. But if he didn't act decisively just now and let these old monsters suspect that he and his bastard disciple had ulterior motives, the loss along the way would definitely be more than a stove. Forget it. If the news is right, the treasures in one level are enough for me to cultivate dozens of stoves. It's not a big deal that one died now. Just as Yuan forcibly comforted himself, Heaven Rover had finished studying the map and said with a little disappointment, "It seems that this map is only the route to enter the huge stone matrix from the outside world. We've already arrived, so the map is of no value at all." Tut, not only did we work in vain, but we also saw blood when we went out. What bad luck. A short and fat old man in a green robe with pustules on his face shook his head and said in an extremely bad tone. Hearing this, Yuan snorted coldly and didn't say much. "Well, don't be impatient, fellow practitioners. Although today is the best time to enter the cave, no one knows what will happen if they stay in the black stone forest for a long time. Without further ado, I'll open the entrance of the cave now." As soon as Heaven Rover said this, everyone immediately stopped talking and watched him quietly. Seeing this, Heaven Rover's smile remained unchanged. He raised his hands and waved them in the nothingness, drawing circles of golden arcs one after another. At the same time, he chanted, and the spiritual power in the surrounding nothingness was immediately absorbed into it, rippling along with the arcs. As time went by, the arcs that originally seemed gentle gradually became sharp, cutting the nothingness with golden sparks flashing out. "Fellow practitioners, come and help me quickly." Heaven Rover looked serious and shouted in a low voice, changing the gesture in his hands. The old monsters of Yuanying realm immediately sensed that there seemed to be something in the nothingness, which connected with the golden arcs, and 5 defects appeared. They immediately changed their expressions and threw out the cave keys they carried without hesitation. For rays of light, gold, red, cyan, and green, flashed into the arcs, and the nothingness shook instantly. Su Li's eyes suddenly narrowed. The 4 jade talismans that flew out were obviously the same as the divine thunder of earth jade talisman she got. All the divine thunder of 5 elements jade talismans appeared. But these people obviously didn't know what they were and didn't sense the pneuma of thunder attached to them. "Where is the 5th jade key?" Seeing that there was still an empty groove, Heaven Rover's face was slightly gloomy. Wang Yu, who was still waiting for others to throw out the jade key, felt a thump in her heart. She didn't dare to hesitate and hurriedly threw out the jade key in her hand, which blended into the arcs and reached perfection. The 5 colored rays appeared together and rotated slowly, merging into a white light. There were subtle electric arcs around the flowing light that flashed away. If Su Li hadn't known the pneuma of the divine thunder, she wouldn't have seen it at all. Oh my! The combination of the 5 elements and the thunder of tranquility. This cave doesn't seem simple. Little Su Li, you have to be careful. If you fail miserably, it will be bad. Black Lotus's bewildered voice sounded. Before Su Li had time to ask what the thunder of tranquility was, she was sucked in by the huge suction in the arc and disappeared. After a short period of absent-mindedness, Su Li's eyes became lively again. What she saw had changed greatly. It was no longer the gloomy and dark black stone forest, but a huge cave with no end at a glance. And they were on a lonely round platform. In front of the round platform, there was a stone road suspended in the nothingness, extending to the distance. No one knew where it led to. Except for this road, all the other places were empty and dark. No one knew where the stone platform stood. How high was it? Heaven Rover checked the team and found that there was no defect. He suddenly looked solemn and said, "Everyone, we have entered the ancient cave, but no one knows what dangers and opportunities are hidden in this cave. Only by working together will we be able to reap more benefits. In order to explore this cave, I have read many ancient books. Although I don't know who left this cave, judging from the setting of the round platform, this is a cave of inheritance. The outsiders who pass the test are likely to get the inheritance of the owner of this cave. As for how strong the inheritance of the ancient practitioners is, I don't need to say more, right?" As soon as this remark came out, everyone's eyes brightened, and there was a hidden greed in their eyes. The cave of inheritance? That was what almost every practitioner in the cultivation circle dreamed of. In Qingshui Circle, there were many mighty figures who changed their lives and soared to the sky because of the inheritance. This was definitely a shortcut to the supreme way. At this moment, everyone's mind became active. Even Jin Ying's eyes flickered with a trace of expectation. Seeing that the effect was achieved, Heaven Rover chuckled and said, "However, the level of cultivation in ancient times was much higher than that of today. Although we have reached Yuanying realm, if any of us were to take the test alone, there would only be death. So, only by cooperating can we get benefits from this cave." The people who still had fantasies immediately woke up, and a trace of unnaturalness flashed across their faces. Seeing this, Suli chuckled in her heart. Heaven Rover had a good plan. He knew that these old monsters had lived for a long time and had thoughts of becoming demons. Even if they were temporarily blinded by the so-called inheritance, they would soon wake up. Enlightening them before they woke up would imperceptibly increase her right to speak and make it more convenient to command actions. In this way, even if Yuan and others understood Heaven Rover's intention, they would never feel bad. Ahem. The practitioners in Jiuzhou region often say that Heaven Rover has profound attainments. Today I see that you deserve your reputation. Immortal Bingshu said slowly, speaking out what everyone was thinking. When Heaven Rover heard the words, he smiled carelessly and skipped the topic. He pointed to the stone road and said, "If I'm not wrong, the first level is behind the stone road. Without further ado, let's go there immediately." Chapter 385. In the silent space, a group of hundreds of people stepped on the stone road in an orderly manner and moved forward slowly. No one knew whether the first checkpoint mentioned by Heaven Rover was really in front of the stone road, so the speed of the whole team couldn't be increased. Suli walked alone behind Wang Yu, but Jin Ying was held by Wang Yu. Jin Ying's performance along the way was obviously more in line with her. Behind Suli was Dongfang Yi, who deliberately controlled his speed to lag behind. Suli sensed that someone was staring at her back, but she didn't care. She kept walking forward calmly. After a while, the practitioners walked a long way on the floating stone road, and the original stone platform could no longer be seen. From a distance, they looked like ants crawling on a rope, small and lonely. Heaven Rover was about to propose to speed up, but suddenly the stone road shook violently, and everyone's face changed slightly. Then, the last person in the team suddenly lost his footing and fell directly into the endless nothingness with a scream. The shrill scream reverberated, making everyone's scalp numb. "Hurry up! The stone road is collapsing. Everyone, speed up!" Heaven Rover, who was walking in the front, shot out, and his nervous roar spread far away. In fact, there was no need for his deliberate reminder. At the moment when the unlucky guy walking at the end fell, everyone, without exception, burst out their fastest speed and exerted all their strength. Wang Yu was at the back of the team. Seeing this scene, she didn't care about Suli, who was still behind her. She picked up Jin Ying and flew away quickly, causing Jin Ying to exclaim, "Master, junior sister apprentice is still behind." But Wang Yu turned a deaf ear to it and sped up. Only one sacrifice was needed. At present, she couldn't protect herself, so she had no time to care about Su Li's life. Su Li's eyes narrowed slightly on her indifferent face. She was about to reveal part of her strength, but stopped at the critical moment. Then, she felt that she was picked up by the waist and embraced into a warm embrace. The only drawback was that the heartbeat of the owner of the embrace was too fast. Hold on tight. Dongfang gritted his teeth and burst out with the maximum speed. He didn't know why he saved Su Li. He couldn't protect himself, but he did so subconsciously. It will take a lot of time to leave this girl behind. Well, let's leave it to fate. Forcibly explaining to himself, Dongfang smiled bitterly in his heart and fled desperately to the end of the stone road with the frightened crowd. Ah! Help! Save me, master! Screams kept coming from behind, and the sound was getting closer and closer. Dongfang forehead was covered with cold sweat, but he didn't intend to let go of Su Li, this kid. It's obvious that it's difficult for him to even escape by himself. Su Li shrank in Dongfang arms and thought with some amusement. She was about to give him some help secretly. Suddenly, she was dazzled. The old woman in red had appeared. Old Lady Duhua, who had escaped far away, suddenly came back. Regardless of Su Li in Dongfang arms, she reached out to grab Dongfang back collar, turned into a red lightning, and rushed out. Rumble. The stone path continued to descend, releasing rumbling sounds. Even though it was fast, there was a limit to how fast it could go. Everyone used their own life-saving methods and quickly landed on a flat piece of land at the end of the stone path. Thump! Old Lady Duhua waved her hand, and Dongfang, who was holding Su Li, suddenly fell flat on his face. But at this moment, he had no time to make a move, and his heart was full of the joy of escaping. You really don't want your life anymore. Did you waste 100 years of cultivation on a dog? Didn't your father teach you not to be compassionate easily? Old Lady Duhua scolded with a sullen face. If that person hadn't said that there would be some opportunities with this kid on this trip, she wouldn't have to take this risk. Dongfang smiled embarrassedly and quickly cupped his fists. Thank you for saving my life, old lady. Old Lady Duhua snorted coldly and stood aside without speaking. Dongfang didn't care, but his suspicion of Old Lady Duhua was much less. At least now Old Lady Duhua didn't want to kill him. Otherwise, she wouldn't have saved him specially. Brother Dongfang, your palms are sweaty. Can you not wipe them on me? A very low reminder sounded in his ear, and Dongfang's tense mind suddenly paused. He looked down in amazement and happened to meet Su Li's blank and somewhat disgusted eyes. He couldn't help but laugh. He didn't expect to be disgusted by this girl after saving her life, but judging from her appearance, it seemed that she hadn't figured out what had just happened. Junior sister apprentice. At this moment, Jean Ying's voice came. Su Li turned around and saw Jean Ying running to hug her with tears in her eyes. She sobbed, "You scared me, junior sister apprentice, I thought you." Wang Yu didn't expect that someone would save Su Li in this situation. Seeing that Su Li didn't seem to realize that she had been abandoned before, she felt a little less embarrassed. She immediately cupped her fists to Dongfang and said cheekily, "Thank you." The situation was chaotic and extremely dangerous just now. If you hadn't saved me, I would have lost a beloved disciple forever. It doesn't matter. It's just a piece of cake. Dongfang waved his hand again and again with a faint smile on his face, but he was a little disgusted in his heart. He clearly saw the scene when Wang Yu left Su Li. This female practitioner didn't have any teacher-apprentice relationship in her heart. He was afraid that she had an ulterior motive in bringing them here. Seeing Wang Yu leave with Su Li and Jean Ying, Dongfang pursed his lips and finally didn't stop them. Jean Dan realm. My strength is still a little weak. Dongfang took a deep breath and hardened his heart. As Old Lady Duhua said, he didn't know whether he could survive or not. He could save the little girl once, but he couldn't save her many times. After a little cultivation, Heaven Rover counted the number of people and couldn't help but be shocked. There were originally more than 150 people in the team, but now there were only 81 people left. 9 by 9, 81, coincides with the extreme number. Is all this under the control of the unknown? Many people noticed the several numbers and were horrified. The atmosphere suddenly became stagnant. Look, what's that? A young practitioner in Juji realm pointed to the distance and shouted. Everyone looked in the direction of the voice and saw a pyramid-shaped building. There is no way out. Let's go and have a look together, Heaven Rover said in a deep voice, and immediately got everyone's consent. They swept to the front of the pyramid building together. The surface of the building was extremely smooth and monotonous without any patterns, so the stone tablet next to the pyramid was extremely conspicuous. All the practitioners consciously moved closer to take a closer look, and Suli naturally saw the words on the stone tablet. The words of the ancient cultivation era. This cave was indeed left by the ancient practitioners. What is the thunder of tranquility? Unfortunately, after entering the cave, the connection with the Black Lotus was broken again, just like the last time in Chuangxing Path. While Suli was thinking, Wang Yu and other practitioners were shocked, and many of them couldn't hold it in and shouted with ecstasy. The ancient cave. It's really the ancient cave. I can enter the ancient cave in this life. Even if I die here immediately, it's worth it. Bah, don't say such discouraging words. While the ordinary practitioners were talking fiercely, Heaven Rover and others had already focused their attention on the contents of the stone tablet. Fellow practitioner Heaven, you have studied the ancient classics of cultivation for many years. The words on the stone tablet are not difficult for you, right? Yuan asked tentatively. Heaven Rover immediately smiled and said, Of course. Don't worry, fellow practitioner Yuan. Even if I'm wrong, there are still many people here who understand the ancient words. I'll tell you about the contents of the stone tablet first. As soon as he said that, everyone immediately listened attentively. Heaven Rover didn't delay and said according to the contents of the stone tablet, I'm Songlei. When the foreign race invaded, Songlei survived the war and felt hopeless. So, he spent thousands of years to build this cave of inheritance and finally succeeded. If the predestined person can inherit my mantle, he should take the survival of a circle as his own responsibility and contribute to Qingshui Circle. If you are not predestined, I won't let you return empty-handed if you can pass the test. This tower is the first test, called Sanjin Tower. If you can reach the top of the tower within 100 breaths, you will pass the test. Everyone has only one chance to take the test in his life. The practitioners of later generations can only get rid of the slaves by strengthening themselves. I hope you won't let me down. When Heaven Rover said the last sentence, the eyes of the remaining 80 people suddenly brightened. This seemed to be very different from the 6 levels that Heaven Rover said before. They originally thought that every practitioner who was assigned to a level could monopolize the treasures of the entire level, but they didn't expect that everyone could have the chance to take the test. Heaven Rover didn't seem to expect it either. He looked a little embarrassed and said apologetically, What I knew before was just a speculation from the ancient books. It's normal to have some discrepancies. But for you, it's not a loss that one chance becomes 6. As he said, he looked at the short and fat old man in a green robe and a tall and thin man in gray, who were originally arranged in the first level, and said with a smile, The first level is obviously a test of speed. You two are the fastest practitioners among all of us. You might as well try it first. If you can't pass, the rest of us don't have to try. The old man in a green robe laughed when he heard the words. One of the injured pustules suddenly burst, and a lump of flesh came out from it. In the blink of an eye, it turned into an ugly monster with a mouth full of sharp fangs, and its murderous roar spread far away. The practitioners in Jiuzhou region all say that Heaven Rover is well informed. You are really worthy of your reputation. You even know my treasure of speed. Fine. Thanks for your praise. I'll give it a try. The old man in a green robe patted the head of the monster, and a green light flashed in his old eyes. The ugly monster immediately roared and turned into a light, rushing to Sanjin Tower. The tall and thin man looked at the monster climbing up the Sanjin Tower with an indifferent and unfathomable face. No one knew what he was thinking. The rest of the practitioners couldn't help but feel a little shocked, and their pupils shrank with fear. The monster was really fast, and it seemed to be powerful. Wang Yu glanced at the old man in a green robe covered with pustules without a trace. Chapter 386. Bang! On the golden stairs of the Sanjin Tower, the monster that was still moving at a high speed suddenly burst into a cloud of blood mist without warning, staining the stairs with a touch of bright red. The green-robed elder was counterattacked, and his complexion changed slightly. He forcibly swallowed the blood that rushed into his throat, and the smile on his face immediately disappeared. What happened? Why did the puppet explode? Everyone was shocked and doubtful. No one saw clearly how the puppet of the green-robed elder died. Only Heaven Rover's eyes flashed with an expression that it was true. Except for Suli, who was sensitive, no one noticed his change. He slowly stood up and analyzed in a deep voice. Although I don't know if Songlei was powerful in the ancient cultivation era, this is the inheritance cave of an ancient cultivator after all. It's not realistic if he can easily pass the first test. The green-robed elder calmed down when he heard the words. He snorted and sat down beside him. He said coldly, "A puppet is nothing, but it makes my pneuma and blood unstable. I need to tease it. Since everyone has a chance to try, those who are interested might as well go and have a try." After that, he closed his eyes and adjusted his breath, regardless of other people's reaction. After he calmed down, he even had a hint of complacency in his heart. He manipulated the puppet to pass the level instead of going in person. That was to say, every time he went there, he was an independent individual. If he could really take advantage of this loophole, as long as he had enough puppets, he could keep trying. Compared with others who only had one chance, the probability of passing the level was much higher. However, there were too many people at this moment. If he tried in front of everyone, it might cause others to be jealous and attack him together. He made up his mind that he would come back to test his conjecture when others tried other levels. Regardless of what the green-robed elder was thinking, the atmosphere in the field became strange as he spoke. The inexplicable self-explosion of the puppet just happened not long ago. Before they figured out the reason, how dare they rashly go up? After all, they only had one life. Heh, what a bunch of cowards. How can you walk further on the path of cultivation if you are so timid? The tall, thin man suddenly laughed mockingly, revealing a mouthful of sinister white teeth. The expression of Yuan, who had the worst temper, immediately changed. He was about to curse, but before he could say anything, the tall, thin man turned into an arc of light and dashed up the golden stairs of the three golden pagoda. Almost in the blink of an eye, he had surpassed the speed of the original puppet. Moreover, he was not injured at all, and continued to move forward at a high speed. Seeing this scene, many people suddenly changed their expressions. Even Heaven Rover's eyes were slightly solemn, as if he had met the tall and thin man for the first time. This person is very strange. He is not from our Jojo region. I just liked his speed before, so I invited him. Does anyone know his background? Heaven Rover secretly transmitted the sound, but no one responded. He couldn't help but feel a little disappointed, but he didn't show this emotion on his face. Suli stood in the crowd inconspicuously. She tilted her head slightly, and a trace of profound meaning appeared in her eyes. This trip to the ancient cave dwelling seemed to be getting more and more interesting. Her eyes flickered slightly. She turned her head and naturally glanced at a bunch of strange combinations. It was a woman in purple who exuded a charming aura, and a cold-faced boy in white with white hair. She found that since entering the cave dwelling, everyone had spoken, except for these two people, who seemed to be mute, didn't say a word all the way. If she remembered correctly, these two people should be assigned to the 4th level by Heaven Rover. For the sake of an ancient inheritance, all sorts of monsters are coming out, Zhang Xian muttered. While Su Li's thoughts were tumbling in her mind, the tall and thin man had already stood at the top of the 3 golden pagoda. His calm face couldn't help showing a trace of joy at this moment. He got the reward for clearing the level. This thought emerged in everyone's mind. Driven by interests, many young practitioners who were envious immediately went up the stairs of the 3 golden pagoda. On the other hand, none of those old and shrewd practitioners in Yuanying realm moved. Seeing this scene, Wang Yu hesitated for a moment and finally restrained the desire in her heart. Her strength was not speed. If nothing went wrong, the 6th level was her home field. Why should she fail miserably for the short-term interests in front of her? Whoosh! The tall and thin man's figure flashed down from the top of the 3 golden pagoda, and his expression had returned to indifference. At the same time, a few practitioners with low cultivation suddenly showed a look of horror before they went up 1/3 of the stairs. Before they could leave any last words, they suddenly exploded and died. The horrifying and bloody scene instantly made the remaining young practitioners who wanted to go up shiver and feel cold all over. The tall and thin man sneered unabashedly when he saw this. Do you really think that anyone can get the reward of a mortal Songlei? Stupid. It seemed very easy for him to rush up the tower, but no one knew that he had secretly used several trump cards on the way. However, the loss was definitely worth it to get that thing. Do you still want to try? Heaven Rover smiled kindly and glanced at the rest of the people, but he didn't feel embarrassed when he didn't get any response. He pointed to the direction on the stone tablet that appeared out of nowhere and said, "Since no one has tried again, let's go to the 2nd level. Fellow practitioner Heaven, you seem to know too much about this ancient cave, don't you?" After adjusting his breath, the green-robed elder opened his eyes and stared at Heaven Rover with a gloomy smile. He didn't believe that he could know the detailed test of every level in the ancient cave in advance just by consulting the classics. Hearing this, Heaven Rover still looked calm. He shook his head and said with a smile, "It seems that fellow practitioner 1 is not going to leave this level?" The green-robed elder was shocked. In this sentence, Heaven Rover clearly pointed out that he had seen through his purpose and used it as a threat, but he couldn't say it out loud to confuse the doubts in his heart. Humph, I know my own ability, and I only have some advantages in speed. Since I have to gamble with my life to pass the level, why should I go to the other 5 levels to die? He vaguely explained his previous doubts. Heaven Rover smiled slightly and didn't pursue it. He nodded and said, "Since fellow practitioner 1 has made up his mind, I can't persuade you anymore." After saying that, he really didn't look at the green-robed elder and left with the rest of the practitioners. Seeing this scene, several young people who had followed the green-robed elder hesitated for a moment, and finally followed Heaven Rover's pace with their teeth clenched. It was a chance to reach the heavens in 1 step. How could they be willing to give it up? The green-robed elder was eager to do so. He was not angry at the betrayal of several young practitioners. In the cave of inheritance of such a level, practitioners who had not reached Jindan realm were like cannon fodder. He didn't need to be angry at a few dead people at all. However, Heaven Rover led the crowd to find the 2nd level very easily according to the guidance. The process was incredibly easy, as if there was no other danger in this cave except for accepting the test. The 2nd test steel. Seeing the steel of the same style, Yuan and others looked as usual, but each had their own ideas. Along the way, the guidance had clearly disappeared, but Heaven Rover led them here with ease. It seemed that he had been here many times. Old Lady Duhua, there is something wrong with Heaven Rover. We have to be careful. Yuan secretly transmitted the sound. Old Lady Duhua didn't look at him, but glanced at Dongfangyi beside her, and then slowly transmitted the sound. I have cultivated for more than 3,000 years, and I have seen the world. I will not be plotted against by a junior. If there is something fishy, you and I can join hands. What Yuan wanted was the last sentence. Hearing this, he felt a little relieved and stopped transmitting his voice. The rest of the practitioners also communicated secretly. The team that was originally united to pass the test began to be divided from this moment on. While communicating, Heaven Rover had finished reading the content on the steel. Yuan Laogui's physical strength could be regarded as the top in the Yuanying realm. Although Old Lady Duhua was best at using poison, she had cultivated herself into the drought demon body in her early years, so her physical strength was not worse than Yuan Laogui's. As expected, the 2nd level was a test of the physical strength. Hee, I will pass if I can hold on for 10 seconds after entering the bell. Yuan looked at the golden bell suspended on the altar behind the steel, with a smile on his old face. He strode to the altar and entered the scope of the bell without any hesitation. Clang! The melodious bell rang from the altar and stopped in everyone's ears. It contained an inexplicable, beautiful melody, which made people involuntarily immersed in it. But Yuan, who was in the scope of the bell, changed his face. With a deep roar, his skin showed a black luster like iron and stone. Suppress. As he said this, Yuan's muscles, which were still shaking wildly, immediately quieted down. But this moment of silence did not last long, and the second bell rang. Ding! Even the people outside the scope of the bell couldn't help but feel their blood and qi boiling. Unsurprisingly, Yuan, who was under the bell, directly spat out a mouthful of blood and almost fainted. Huh! This big bell has a kind of effect of purifying the physical body. Su Li narrowed her eyes and looked at the big bell with a little more enthusiasm. Since she left Chuangxing Path, her physical body had not been improved for a long time. What a terrible golden bell! Looking at Yuan, who was spitting out blood, old lady Duhua's eyes flashed a touch of solemnity and hesitation. If she went there, she would not be much better than Yuan. Su Li glanced at old lady Duhua, who was full of fear, thoughtfully. It seemed that if one's physical body was not strong enough, he would only be seriously injured in the face of this big bell, and could not enjoy the benefits of refining. On the altar, the ninth breath. Yuan reluctantly stuffed a healing elixir into his mouth and managed to suppress his injury. But he saw the ripples of the golden bell, and another bell sound was quickly brewing. His expression immediately turned into horror, and he wanted to rush out of the range of the golden bell. But before he took action, the terrible third bell rang, and in the blink of an eye, his physical body was shattered and annihilated in the nothingness, without leaving a trace of blood. Gudong. Chapter 387. Phew! Heaven Rover let out a long sigh and remained silent, as if he hadn't completely digested the unexpected death of Yuan in a short time. Old Lady Duhua also looked solemn and had no intention of going up to try the golden bell. Her physical body was almost the same as Yuan Laogui's. Even Yuan Laogui had lost his life carelessly. What was the point of her trying? Yuan's voice seemed to linger in her ears. In such a short time, such a big change happened. Even with thousands of years of experience, old Lady Duhua couldn't help but sigh at this moment. There were not many opportunities to witness the death of an old monster in Yuanying realm. I didn't expect the second level to be so dangerous. Heaven Rover's familiar voice sounded, and there was no lack of regret in his tone. Then he turned to old Lady Duhua and asked, "Fellow practitioner Yuan's death may be just an accident. The road of cultivation is difficult and dangerous. Maybe this level has different powers for different people. Would you like to have a try, fellow practitioner Duhua?" Hearing Heaven Rover's obviously provocative words, old Lady Duhua sneered in her heart. Heaven Rover, you really treat us as fools." But she looked helpless and shook her head. "It's not that I don't want to. In terms of physical body, I'm almost the same as fellow practitioner Yuan. Why should I go to court death?" "That's a pity," Heaven Rover sighed, looked at the stone tablet that didn't show the guidance of the next level, and continued hypocritically, "No one has passed the level, so there is no way to know the guidance of the next level. I can't let you go to court death. For now, I can only rely on my speculation and take one step at a time." "Haha." Immortal Bingshu stood up and chuckled. "Fellow practitioner Heaven, don't be modest. Do whatever you want. Even if we can't find the next level, we will never put the blame on you." "Yes, Senior Heaven, please take us to the third level." As soon as Immortal Bingshu said this, everyone immediately agreed, and even the old monsters in Yuanying realm nodded with a smile. No one showed their real thoughts on their faces. Didn't he see that Yuan just made a guess and was soon dead? Although it was not necessarily Heaven Rover who did it, it didn't prevent other practitioners from making associations. "Thank you, fellow Taoists. I didn't expect that at this time, everyone would still be willing to listen to this old man." Heaven Rover was moved. He flipped his palm, and a light flashed above his palm. Immediately, a black and white compass appeared in his hand. This plate is known as the treasure-seeking plate, and it possesses an unfathomable guiding effect. Whether or not we can find the next stage will depend on it. As he said, Heaven Rover injected the power of yuanying into the compass. The pointer on the compass trembled and turned rapidly. It didn't take long for it to be fixed in a certain direction. Over there, with a flash of light in his eyes, Heaven Rover followed the direction of the compass without hesitation, and the others immediately followed him. Su Li looked at the aged back of Heaven Rover, and her eyes flickered. Others might not notice it, but at the moment when Heaven Rover cast the spell, she clearly sensed a fluctuation that was very similar to the divine thunder of Earth. The fluctuation lacked the heaviness of the divine thunder of Earth, but she was not sure which divine thunder of 5 elements it was. However, the only thing she could be sure of was that this Heaven Rover definitely had some unspeakable relationship with this cave of inheritance. On the desolate and boundless gloomy plain, everyone trekked for 5 days under the leadership of Heaven Rover before they finally saw the stone tablet. Heaven Rover's tense expression was visibly relaxed, and he said in a deep voice, "After wandering for a few days, I finally found a stone tablet." Gee. Before he finished speaking, Old Lady Duhua made a sound of surprise. She looked hesitant for a moment and said, "This seems to be not the 3rd stone tablet?" "What? Not the 3rd level?" Everyone's face changed slightly. Heaven Rover seemed to have just noticed this, and he quickly looked at the stone tablet. But this made him laugh bitterly and explain, "Fellow practitioner Duhua is right. This is the 4th stone tablet, corresponding to the 4th level." He actually skipped the 3rd level? Wang Yu was a little incredulous. Anyone who knew a little about the Cave of Inheritance from antiquity times knew that the inheritance in ancient times was particularly strict. Those who accepted the test had to pass the level step by step according to the master of the cave, but now they were obviously led astray by Heaven Rover. Heaven Rover took out the compass and saw that the pointer on it pointed to the stone tablet in front of him motionlessly. He suddenly showed a helpless expression. "It seems that we have to skip the 3rd level and start from the 4th level. Fortunately, Senior Tsang Lei did not say that we need to take the test in order, so it is not cheating, and it should not trigger the punishment inhibition of the cave." As soon as he said this, a soft and charming voice suddenly sounded. It turned out that the seductive woman in purple who had never spoken finally spoke, but her tone was not friendly at all. "Senior Tian, it's easy for you to say that. The 4th stage is this servant's home ground. If we're talking about taking risks, it should be this servant. Senior wants to send this junior to his death with just a few words. Isn't that too much?" With the last light hum, a pink phantom seemed to flash through the nothingness. The young male practitioners with poor cultivation were immediately fascinated by it, and some even drooled. Their bodies reacted, showing their ugliness. It's another powerful figure with an unknown origin. Wang Yu stood next to the seductive woman and couldn't help stepping back at this moment, with fear in her eyes. Before coming here, she thought that with her inherited means, even if her cultivation had not reached yuanying realm, it was enough to deal with everything. But when she came here, she realized that there were too many capable people in the cultivation circle, and her means were nothing compared to this group of people. "Fellow practitioner Xian, don't be anxious." Heaven Rover chuckled. In the face of the seductive woman's question, he was not angry at all. "It's normal for you to be worried, but my guess has some basis, but it comes from ancient books. Even if I tell you, you probably won't believe it. If that's the case, this old man has a compromise." Speaking of this, Heaven Rover pointed to the stone tablet and continued. As the stone tablet said, the 4th level is a test of the soul. In terms of the attainment of the soul, I am far inferior to fellow practitioner Shin Meiji and fellow practitioner Snowchild. But even if I can't pass the level, I think I can survive in the 4th level. As long as I can keep my life, it can prove that what I said before is true. At that time, fellow practitioner Shin and fellow practitioner Snow can attack the level. How about that? Heaven Rover's words were reasonable and well-founded, and he was even ready to take risks. Shin Meiji couldn't find any loopholes, so she immediately looked a little relaxed and nodded. "Since Senior Tian has already put it this way, how can I not agree?" Heaven Rover laughed and looked at the white-haired boy in white with an inquiring look. The latter still remained silent, but after thinking about it, he nodded slightly in response. With the affirmation of the two, Heaven Rover didn't hesitate and walked to the dark stone room on the altar of the 4th level without saying a word. In the blink of an eye, he entered the stone room. The next moment, the black stone room distorted in everyone's horrified eyes and disappeared directly. The person who led the way suddenly disappeared. Even the old foxes of Yuanying Realm, who had been calm all the time, couldn't help but change their expressions and look gloomy. That old thing couldn't have escaped, right? I've noticed something wrong with him for a long time. If I had known it, I would have stayed with Senior One and been closer to the exit. Now we have no sense of direction in this damn place. Will we be trapped here to death? In the inexplicably quiet atmosphere, as time went by, a sense of panic slowly spread. Shin Meiji stared at the altar intently. She was neither angry nor went up to the altar. At this moment, Snow Child, who was like a sculpture, suddenly moved. His movement immediately attracted the attention of most old foxes of Yuanying Realm, but when they saw that Snow Child just sat down and waited, they were speechless. Seeing this, Shin Meiji showed a trace of surprise in her eyes. She turned a smile and said, "Giggle, Brother Snow. It's so boring to sit alone. I'll come to accompany you." As she said, Shin Meiji actually twisted her waist and sat next to Snow Child, ignoring the disappeared black stone room, which made everyone confused. Suli also sat down. But she was just in Lianqi Realm on the surface, so no one noticed her action. The stone room is still there, but it is shrouded by a special force which can't be sensed. This force is somewhat similar to the illusion I encountered in Chuangxing Path. The kind of power that turned from false to real was particularly impressive to Suli, so she saw through the details of the altar at a glance. Heaven Rover obviously won't die so easily. I'd like to see what his purpose is after this play. Just as Suli was secretly planning, Immortal Bingshu and others were also sensible people. Seeing the abnormal reactions of Shin Meiji and Snow Child, they all dispelled the idea of leaving and found a place to rest and wait quietly. Time passed slowly. When Suli finished sorting out the last paragraph of the foundation chapter of Sueyu Tactics, the 4th altar finally responded. Boom! With a heavy muffled sound, the black stone room reappeared, and then everyone saw Heaven Rover, who turned into a gray shadow, escape from it. As soon as he landed, his face was slightly red, and he opened his mouth to spit out a mouthful of blood. Ahem, covering his chest and coughing a few times, Heaven Rover's eyes flashed with a strong lingering fear, and he regretfully said, "The illusion of the 4th level is too terrible. I tried my best to stay awake and escape. If I were a little later, I'm afraid I would be lost in it." Illusion? The black stone room was full of illusions? Hearing what Heaven Rover said, many Yuanying Realm old foxes' eyes flickered. Being able to get to this step, they all had treasures to protect their souls more or less, so they all had the same idea. Shin Meiji smiled, as if hundreds of flowers were blooming, extremely bright. Senior Tian is really decisive. Since Senior has already fulfilled his promise, I have to go and see how terrifying the illusion that Senior mentioned is, as she said. Her beautiful and bright eyes turned to Snow Child. The latter's face did not change, and he directly returned to his original place to sit down to show his meaning. You go. Shin Meiji covered her mouth and chuckled, "Brother Snow, you really know how to cherish the fairer sex at such a young age. I'll be back soon. I won't let you wait for 5 days." After that, Shin Meiji floated down to the altar and also entered the 4th level of the test. Chapter 388. Shin Meiji really didn't talk nonsense. Just 2 days later, the familiar seductive figure flashed out of the stone room that reappeared, and she was unscathed. Seeing this, everyone subconsciously looked at the stone tablet and saw the location of the 5th level shown on the stone tablet. Ha ha ha. Fellow practitioner Shin is really powerful. I think you have already got the reward of this level? Heaven Rover said with relief and kindness, without any jealousy. Shin Meiji's charming eyes flashed, and she said with a soft smile, "Senior Heaven, why do you stare at me? I'm afraid that what I got is not half of the value of Brother Huang. 100 celestial stones. If Brother Huang is willing, I am willing to exchange the thing in my hand for 150 celestial stones. What do you think, Brother Huang?" As soon as Shin Meiji said this, the tall and thin man who had passed the first level suddenly changed his face and looked gloomy. After a moment of silence, he slowly spat out 3 words. "You wanna die?" Shin Meiji showed a look of fear, but her eyes were full of playfulness, and her tone was a little more gloating. "Brother Huang is really terrible. I just want to make a deal. Since Brother Huang is unwilling, forget it." As she spoke, she glanced at others and saw that everyone else faintly showed eagerness and greed. She couldn't help but sneer in her heart. She thought that people didn't really want to make a deal with the tall and thin man. As long as a person passed the level, he could easily know the information of others who had passed the level, and the thing in her hand was also very precious. If it was revealed by Snow Child, or those who had passed the 5th and 6th level, the situation would become extremely dangerous. In this case, she could only take the initiative. If the tall and thin man became the target of public criticism, her pressure would be much less. "Bitch, how dare you?" The tall and thin man realized his situation, and his eyes were cold. He turned around and fled without saying a word. So decisive. Shin Meiji was stunned, and her plan failed. Her beautiful face was a little ugly. Others also looked at the tall and thin man who disappeared in the distance and sighed with pity. No one expected that the tall and thin man would be so decisive and flee directly. In a hurry, he took the lead. With his speed, no one on the scene could catch up with him. Even Suli asked herself that when it came to speed, she was only equal to him. Under the premise of falling behind, there was no possibility to catch up. 300 celestial stones. Su Li's eyes flickered. There were indeed celestial stones in this cave, but 300 was still too little for her to be interested. But Wang Yu couldn't help showing a trace of excitement on her face at this moment. Celestial stones. It's actually celestial stones. She, Wang Yu, got the inheritance by chance and was knowledgeable. Naturally, she knew the role of the celestial stone. It was a purer and milder practicing resource than the best spiritual stone. The pure spiritual energy made it easier to break the bottleneck. Wang Ti Wang. King of King, pure spiritual chi made it easier for people to break through bottlenecks. The value of each celestial crystal was more than 10,000 times that of a supreme-grade spiritual stone. Such a treasure was basically priceless and hard to come by. T Celestial. Damn it, why wasn't I the one who passed the first test? T Meister. King saying, "Child T." Wang Yu looked excited and full of regret. If she had known this, she would have tried the first level even if she had played all her cards. Well, since fellow practitioner Huang doesn't want to be with us, let's go our separate ways. Fellow Taoists, there's no need to be discouraged. We've only tried the 3rd trial. Once we've found the remaining 3 trials, you can try it out yourselves. If you do your best, there's bound to be one who'll get what he wants. If the rewards you receive aren't satisfactory, this old man can also guarantee that you'll be able to trade without any worries. The voice of Heaven Rover sounded at the right time, like a gentle spring flowing through the heart, soothing the irritable mood. Everyone's eyes were full of enthusiasm. Senior Tian is right. We have many opportunities. Senior Huang is so short-sighted to leave the team. Yes, scoundrel, we don't want to be with him. When expressing their views on the tall and thin man, everyone had the same idea. Even Wang Yu couldn't help but criticize him, which made Heaven Rover look at her. After that, Snow Child entered the altar. Everyone waited for less than 2 days, and the white figure reappeared. Judging from the length of time, his strength was obviously above Shin Meiji. Back in the crowd, Snow Child was still expressionless. He only looked at Shin Meiji for a moment, and then looked at Heaven Rover. His words were extremely simple. The 5th level. Heaven Rover was stunned for a moment, and then began to lead the way. Since Snow Child didn't mean to mention the reward of Shin Meiji, he certainly couldn't ask. Xian Meiji breathed a sigh of relief when she saw this, but she didn't dare to relax completely. She had said before that what she got was worth 150 celestial stones. Now Huangshan suddenly escaped, and Snow Child's strength was above her. It was hard to guarantee that no one else in the team would be interested in her. With the guidance, it was much easier for Heaven Rover to find the 5th level. After only half a day, he arrived at the place where the next stone tablet was. Unlike the previous two, the place to accept the test this time was not an altar, but a palace. After reading the contents of the stone tablet at a glance, Heaven Rover suddenly laughed and said loudly, "Everyone, we can all accept this test." As soon as these words came out, everyone was shocked. Heaven Rover quickly explained the meaning of the stone tablet. This test is designed to test talent. We, the cultivators, go against the heaven. Without talent, we can't move a step forward. As a descendant of Tsonglei, if your talent is not up to standard, even if you get my inherited practice method, you definitely can't practice it. So, if you can't get my recognition in this level, you will directly lose the qualification to inherit. I, Tsonglei, have practiced for tens of thousands of years and collected countless practice methods. 3 million low-grade practice methods, 500,000 middle-grade practice methods, 180 top-grade practice methods, 3 top-grade practice methods, and 1 holy method of nature's punishment school. The conditions for practicing the holy method are extremely harsh. In order to select a suitable successor, I specially exchanged 3 top-grade practice methods for a simplified version of the holy method of nature's punishment school, which can also be called a pseudo-holy method. Whoever can master it will be qualified to take the next test and inherit the orthodoxy of Tsonglei. When everyone heard what Heaven Rover said, they were all shocked. Even Snow Child, who had been silent, was no exception. My God, the top-grade holy method of the ancient cultivation era? What I'm practicing now is not even a top-grade practice method, let alone a top-grade practice method. There are 180 top-grade practice methods in this cave. How powerful were the ancient cultivators? Nature's punishment school? Are there many schools of ancient holy methods? Why haven't I heard of any of them? The fierce discussion made the palace as lively as a vegetable market in the blink of an eye. Heaven Rover did not stop them. He also stared at the stone tablet with fiery eyes. I've waited for this step for too long. The holy method of nature's punishment and the inheritance of immortal Tsonglei can only be mine. Immortal Bingshu coughed violently twice, and an abnormal blush appeared on his sallow face, showing that he was extremely uncalm inside, and there was a trace of disbelief. Holy method? In this kind of remote Juzhou region, there is a school of holy method inheritance? It is clearly recorded in the classics of the sect that in ancient times, this area of Juzhou region was still a sea, and there was no human habitation at all. Are those records false? While falling into self-doubt, Immortal Bingshu's eyes were also shining. He was the top genius of the sect. In terms of talent and temperament, he was the strongest in the sect. He could definitely pass the 5th test and become one of the candidates for the inheritance of the cave. While being overwhelmed with emotions, Immortal Bingshu couldn't help but look at Heaven Rover with suspicion in his eyes. Was it a coincidence that he was arranged in the 5th test, or junior sister apprentice? Why are they all so excited as if they are possessed? What is the holy method? What mental method do we practice in Huajian sect? Jining and Suli were undoubtedly the calmest in the field now. The former was ignorant, while the latter didn't care. Suli glanced at Jining, whose eyes were full of curiosity. She thought for a moment and replied quite seriously, "The holy method should be a very powerful practice method. If I am not mistaken, the practice method we practice is at most the middle grade." Ah, so low. Jean Ying's little face frowned, and she immediately clenched her small fist and hummed, "Then I also want to practice the holy method." As soon as she said this, the young practitioners around suddenly let out a low laugh, but no one cared about a little girl like her. Suli couldn't help smiling and wondered what the holy method of nature's punishment school was. Not surprisingly, the so-called nature's punishment was probably the same as Chuangxing Path, which was a kind of ancient holy method of cultivation school. But now she couldn't contact Blackface, so she didn't know which school was stronger or weaker. However, she was sure of one thing. Songlei, the owner of this cave, was by no means a nobody in ancient times. Just when everyone was still talking fiercely, a deep and heavy male voice suddenly came from the silent palace. This palace is used for practice by the examinees. Where the rush cushion is, the practice method will appear automatically. The time limit is 1 month. If you can get into the practice method, it will be given to you as a lucky chance. If you can't get into the practice method, I will also pick out the practice method as a reward according to the level of practice. There was a moment of silence in the palace, and everyone was shocked. This. Immortal Songlei is still alive? It's impossible. The first stone tablet clearly says that Immortal Songlei is dead. Yes. Hearing someone refuting, Heaven Rover's eyebrows also relaxed. This palace may have the means left by Immortal Songlei, but it is not immortal. As soon as he finished speaking, rush cushions appeared everywhere in the palace, and the number was exactly the number of people who entered the palace at this moment. The practitioners who were still looking for rush cushions immediately stopped, and their eyes showed urgency. Everyone. Chapter 389. I didn't expect that even 2 little girls in Lianchi realm who know nothing have futons. When Suli sat down, she clearly heard the whisper of a young practitioner behind her, but Jining didn't feel it. She excitedly began to communicate with the practice method in the futon and slowly immersed herself in it. 1 month was very tight, and no one wanted to waste it. Soon, except for Suli who was still awake in the entire hall, everyone else entered the state of meditation. Suli evoked a trace of psychic awareness and probed into the futon. It didn't take long for a pseudo-holy method with thousands of ancient characters to appear in her mind. Although they were ancient characters, there was a special power in the characters. Even if she didn't know the characters, she could understand the meaning. Obviously, Songlei also considered the changes of the characters with the changes of the times, so he used this way to convey information. It's a little interesting. This pseudo-holy method is indeed much better than the current practice method. But I have the holy method of Sueyu tactics, so it's quite boring for me to read the pseudo-holy method. After reading the whole mental method, Suli was quite helpless. She thought that she could get another mental method that could be verified with Sueyu tactics, but from the pseudo-holy method, she could see the whole picture. The so-called nature's punishment holy method was probably far inferior to Sueyu tactics. However, after all, it is a school of holy method. Even if I don't practice it, I can give it to Master and Jining. As the thought flashed through her mind, Suli reluctantly prepared to practice the pseudo-holy method. But this pseudo-holy method is too simple. 3 days are enough for me to get started. The first 27 days will be used to comprehend Sueyu tactics. After making up her mind, Suli no longer cared about the pseudo-holy method and immersed herself in the comprehension of Sueyu tactics. She was also comprehending the mental method. From the outside, she was no different from others, so she didn't have to worry about being exposed. While the group of people were still practicing in the ancient cave, far away in Huajin sect, the 1-month period agreed by Beishao Liang and the protector elder of Yushu sect had arrived. Elder, hasn't Wang Yu done anything yet? Beishao Liang frowned and hadn't relaxed in the past few days. Indeed, how can I mistake the Numa of Hong Yu? She has been staying in her bedroom, and her Numa is faint. It's very likely that she is practicing in isolation. The law protector elder spoke in a deep voice. Forcibly disturbing the seclusion of others is a taboo in the cultivation world. You don't want to fall out with Huajin sect. I think it's better to give it a long thought. You should go back to the sect to practice and improve your strength first. When you become a practitioner of Yuanying realm or even a higher level, Wang Yu will be a piece of cake. How can you be constrained? Beishao Liang was silent for a moment and finally sighed. He understood that the protector elder was right, but he hadn't gotten his revenge, and the anger in his heart hadn't been quelled. How could he cultivate in peace? No matter how high her cultivation was, she couldn't cover the whole Qingshui circle. At that time, As long as Wang Yu left Jiuzhou region, who could find her? Seeing Bei Xiao Liang hesitating, the elder of Protector shook his head secretly. When he was about to speak again, the alarm suddenly rang in Huajian's sect. Clang! Dang! Dang! The hasty bell immediately made Bei Xiao Liang stand up in shock. He said to himself incredulously, "Is someone attacking the big tactical matrix for protecting the sect?" The Protector Elder also stood up slowly with a solemn look. Through the big tactical matrix, he could clearly feel that there was more than one practitioner of Yuanying realm bombarding outside the tactical matrix. Why did a small Huajian sect attract such a strong enemy? Is it possible that our Yushu sect is the enemy and Bei Xiaoliang's whereabouts have been leaked? The Protector Elder thought for a while, but Bei Xiaoliang flew out of the palace to Li Guang's palace without saying a word. Boom! Boom! The sound of bombarding the big tactical matrix was getting louder and louder. The disciples of Huajian's sect had never suffered such an attack. Some young disciples immediately ran out in a hurry and looked at the big tactical matrix for protecting the sect changing color in the sky with pale faces. Who dares to make trouble in my Huajian sect? Before the third bombardment fell, a white rainbow shot out of the main peak and stopped steadily at the edge of the big tactical matrix. An old man in a white robe appeared. It's the First Elder. The First Elder came out. Many low-level disciples were shocked, but the old man called the First Elder didn't look good when he saw a group of people coming aggressively in the tactical matrix. There were 9 people in total, all of whom were above Jindan realm. He couldn't sense the pneuma of 2 of them. Only the practitioners of Yuanying realm couldn't be sensed by him at the peak of Jindan realm. Headmaster has broken through, but she alone can't deal with 2 practitioners of Yuanying realm. Thinking of this, the First Elder sneered coldly. I don't know which 2 seniors have come to bombard the tactical matrix of our sect without saying a word. Do they fancy this barren land? The leading purple-robed elder looked gloomy. Hearing that the First Elder's tone was not respectful at all, his eyes became colder. He took a step forward and introduced himself word by word. I'm Yu Wu Tao, the elder of Zihan sect. The elder of Zihan sect, the second sect in Jiuzhou region? The First Elder's pupils suddenly shrank. He didn't expect that the background of these people was so horrible. But the people outside the tactical matrix still seemed to feel that this deterrent effect was not enough. Another white-robed elder of Yuanying realm also stood out, narrowed his eyes and said, I'm Su Huabin, the director of Su family. Su family. Another behemoth comparable to the 25 sects. The First Elder's face was stiff, and his heart thumped. Why did the leaders of these 2 big forces come to the door on the same day? Your Huajian sect is really good. Yu Wutao stared at the First Elder with undisguised killing intent in his eyes. Not only immortal Hong Yu who breaks her promise, but also the headmaster is so influential. You are the only elder who comes to receive us. How arrogant you are. Damn it. As he said, he turned over his hands with 2 swords in his hands, and continued to bombard the big tactical matrix for protecting the sect without hesitation. He could easily break the big tactical matrix for protecting the sect of a small sect. The First Elder's heart sank, but he didn't panic when he saw Yu Wutao continue to attack. The tactical matrix of Huajian sect was personally arranged by that person, and it was not easy for those in Yuanying realm to break it. On top of that, the First Elder's face relaxed slightly, and he regained his calmness. Su Huabin frowned when he saw this, and felt that something was wrong. Did Huajian sect have any trump card? While he was wondering, a cold and unpleasant voice suddenly sounded from the hall of the main peak of Huajian sect, and spread throughout Huajian sect in the blink of an eye. Many old people who had stayed in Huajian sect for hundreds of years heard this voice, and immediately couldn't help but get excited. Although the disciples who had been in the sect for less than 100 years had never heard the voice, they quickly reacted when they saw the reactions of the senior fellow apprentices and uncle masters around them. They stared at the sky above the sect with expectation. When Yu Wutao and First Elder heard this voice, their faces changed slightly. Then they saw a purple phantom floating out from the top of the main peak. After a few flashes, it appeared beside the First Elder and stood in the air. Headmaster. The First Elder showed reverence on his face, and hurriedly saluted. Su Huabin was slightly stunned, and his eyes showed surprise. He hadn't paid attention to Huajian sect before, so he didn't know that the headmaster of Huajian sect was a female practitioner. Yu Wutao was much calmer. He took a deep look at the beautiful face, which seemed to be the same as 1,000 years ago. His heart sank slightly, and he couldn't help but sneer. I didn't expect that Hua Yin, the talent in those days, has come to this point. It really surprises me. Hua Yin smiled and said calmly in the face of the two old guys who had been immersed in Yuanying realm for many years, I used to be on the Tianjiao list in Zhejiao region. If I don't break through Yuanying realm, won't I be defeated by ordinary practitioners like you? Hua Yan's words were sarcastic, and Yu Wutao's face changed slightly. Before he could retort, the former turned her eyes again and said to the butler of Su family, the butler of Su family comes at the right time. A few days ago, Su Zini, the seventh holy girl of your family, tried to break into the sect to assassinate me, but was killed by me. She only has a half step to Yuanying realm with her, and she dares to come to my Huajian sect to make trouble. Doesn't she look down on my Huajian sect? When Su Huabin heard this, his anxious mood immediately calmed down, and he nodded with a smile. It turns out that the seventh miss of my family really died in your sect. Thank you for telling me the truth, Headmaster Hua. You really helped me a lot. Hearing the softening in Su Huabin's words, Yu Wutao's eyes widened slightly, and he was about to ask by sound transmission. However, Su Huabin waved his hand and continued with a smile. Don't worry, I'll be fine. I will kill 3,000 disciples of Naiman branch and 1,000 inherited disciples of your sect in return. What do you think, Headmaster Hua? As soon as this remark came out, Hua Yan's smiling face immediately became cold, and a green jade flower appeared in her palm. If you want to kill my people, ask me first. Star-stacked tactical matrix was invincible, but Huajian sect didn't have so many spiritual stones to consume. If Yu Wutao and others attacked wantonly, it wouldn't take long for the energy of the entire tactical matrix to be cut off, and then it would collapse. At that time, many weak disciples of the sect would die, and the whole sect would be in danger of being destroyed. This kind of situation must not happen. Hua Yin gritted her teeth and was about to rush out of the tactical matrix, and First Elder and others also followed her with dignified faces. But at this moment, a long laugh came from Fujian Mount, and then Yu Wutao and others saw Beishao Liang coming on a sword, followed by a cold-faced old man, whose pneuma couldn't be detected. Another practitioner of Yuanying realm? Yu Wutao's eyes almost popped out. Wasn't Huajian sect a low-grade sect? Why did two practitioners of Yuanying realm suddenly pop out? What kind of low-grade sect was this? You are Beishao Liang, the holy son of Yushu sect? Su Huabin suddenly looked horrified and asked in surprise. After all, he was the general manager of Su family, and his status was far above Yu Wutao's. He knew almost all the talents of the major sections. Beishao Liang was the recently promoted holy son of Yushu sect, and he recognized him at a glance. As soon as Su Huabin said this, everyone was shocked, and everyone's eyes focused on Beishao Liang. For a moment, the tense atmosphere actually eased. Chapter 390. Ha ha ha, Nephew Bei, you are wrong. Since Huajian sect is under your protection, we will not offend you. We will leave now. Su Huabin winked at Yu Wutao, who was unwilling to leave, and turned to leave without saying a word. Not to mention Yu Wutao, even Hua Yin and Beishao Liang, who had revealed their identity, did not expect this decisiveness. Yu Wutao's heart was full of resentment, but without Su Huabin's help, he couldn't stay. Seeing Su Huabin walking away, he could only snort and leave angrily. This Su family's chief steward is still as shameless as he was back then. The crisis receded, and Hua Yin seemed to think of something in the past. She narrowed her eyes and sighed softly. Beishao Liang frowned and remained silent. Su family and Zihan sect had a close relationship, and their attitude towards Yushu sect was very strange. He didn't think that he scared Su Huabin away. It's not that simple, he muttered to himself, and didn't mention Wang Yu to Hua Yin for a while. He still cared about the survival of Huajian's sect. After Yu Wutao left, he quickly caught up with Su Huabin, who deliberately slowed down. He asked with an ugly face, "Butler Su, what do you mean? You and I have a deal." "Elder Yu, calm down." Su Huabin interrupted Yu Wutao with a smile and lowered his voice. "Huajian sect is not as simple as you think. Even if Hua Yin is the only one supporting, we may not be able to break through the tactical matrix for protecting the sect, let alone now there are two." As soon as this was said, Yu Wutao was stunned, and then his face was full of disbelief. He shook his head and said, "It's just a small sect. How strong can the tactical matrix for protecting the sect be? If we bombard it together, it will be destroyed in less than a minute." Su Huabin scolded Yu Wutao for being stupid in his heart. He had already said so, but Yu Wutao still didn't understand the meaning. But on the surface, he still explained the origin of the tactical matrix of Huajian sect to Yu Wutao carefully with a gentle smile. After listening, Yu Wutao immediately stopped talking. After all, he came from the era of Holy Girl Su. How could he not know such an evil means? But he didn't expect that a small sect should have such a background. Would the revenge of his granddaughter Yulin be left unsettled? Su Huabin looked at Elder Yu's unwilling expression and knew that the time had come. He smiled and said, "Elder Yu, even if we retreat today, it does not mean that we will let this matter rest." Elder Yu's eyes lit up. "Chief Steward Su, are you saying? Su Zini is the seventh miss of the Su family after all. It's not so easy to let go of this debt. This time, I'm here to investigate the cause of seventh young mistress death. Once I return to the clan and report to the clan, the victim's family will naturally come knocking on my door. When that time comes, Elder Yu will come forth to assist us." Wouldn't that be killing two birds with one stone? Good, good. That's great. Elder Yu laughed loudly. With the help of the seniors of Su family, no matter what tricks Huajian sect plays, they can't escape the fate of annihilation. Then this old man will wait for Chief Steward Su's good news in the Zihan sect. After some discussion, the two of them went their separate ways. Although Hua Yin and Bei Xiaoliang felt that this matter was strange, they didn't know that the danger of the destruction of the sect was approaching. The sect had returned to its usual peace. For cultivators, a month's time was but a fleeting moment. In the blink of an eye, the appointed time for the fifth test in the Manor of Inheritance's main hall had arrived. Swish! All the futons disappeared at the same time, and the practitioners who were still immersed in the enlightenment were immediately awakened. After checking the progress of their practice, almost 80% of them looked gloomy at the same time, while the other 20% who were more scheming were expressionless, and no one could tell whether they were happy or angry. Jining looked dejected. She didn't even sort out the whole mental method of the pseudo-holy method in a month, let alone pass the threshold. Now that the time was up, the memory of the holy method was erased again, and her hard work for this month was in vain. 3 people passed. The voice within the palace rang out once more. Hearing that only 3 people had entered, the young cultivators who had failed all felt a little better in their hearts. It must be known that there were more than 10 Dao Masters and nascent soul old monsters present. There are 5 Yuanying realm practitioners, but only 3 people passed. Even such a powerful existence can't pass the threshold, so it's normal that we can't practice. The young practitioners with low cultivation adjusted their mentality and immediately walked out of their disappointment. Looking at the Yuanying realm practitioners with different expressions, they actually felt that they were watching a play. 3 people. Besides me, there are 2 more people who passed the threshold. Heaven Rover looked calm on the surface, but he was shocked and angry in his heart. He was determined to get this cave. He thought that it would be easy to use these Yuanying realm practitioners to get the inheritance, but he didn't expect that it would become a situation where he led a wolf into the house. I have practiced for 100 years to pass the threshold. Which 2 bastards? Took only 1 month to pass the threshold, and they are so talented. He glanced at the other Yuanying realm practitioners, but he didn't get much information. These people were all old and shrewd, and they wouldn't show the change of their mood on their faces. At this moment, he even had an impulse to kill all of them on the spot, but the 6th and 2nd levels had not been passed yet. He could only deal with one of them at most, and the rest would be left to the third level. These people couldn't die for the time being. Forget it. Wait a little longer. When the sixth level is passed, these people will almost die without me doing anything. With a sneer in his heart, Heaven Rover took a deep breath and restrained his thoughts again. Just when Heaven Rover was struggling, all the practitioners who had not passed the threshold received the first level of reward. 30%, the mental method of the upper grade? It's actually the upper grade mental method. Haha, the mental method I practiced before was not even the middle grade. Many people were overjoyed, and the reward given by the palace obviously exceeded everyone's expectations. 60%, the top practice method. It's not bad. Dongfang Yu was overjoyed. The practice method of the Dongfang family was just at the upper grade. Although he couldn't become the inheritor now, it was a great gain to get a top practice method. Old Lady Du Hua naturally saw that Dongfang Yi got a good mental method, but he reacted at this time, which proved that he was not the one who passed the threshold. Along the way, this kid is very scheming, and he is by no means pretending. It seems that only the 10 people selected by Heaven Rover will pass the threshold, and even Heaven Rover himself? Old Lady Du Hua thought very quickly, but no matter how she guessed, she could never guess that the third person who passed the threshold would be the sacrifice brought by Wang Yu. Su Li looked inside her body and helplessly looked at the genuine qi of the pseudo-holy method that was suppressed under her pubic region as soon as she practiced it. This was the result of her deliberate control. Otherwise, this wisp of genuine qi would have been swallowed by Sueyu tactics. Although the genuine qi is weak, it is the same as the pneuma in the jade token of divine thunder of earth. I wonder what will happen if I mobilize this wisp of genuine qi and inject it into the jade token? Su Li thought about it, and at the same time, Heaven Rover had led everyone to the last level, the sixth level. This level is to test the power of the tactical restriction. 2 days later, Heaven Rover stood in front of the sixth stone tablet and said loudly, in ancient cultivation, the tactical restriction was as important as the cultivation. After every practitioner's foundation was consolidated, he needed to learn the tactical restriction in order to excavate the relics of more ancient times. So, in the sixth level, I must test your cultivation of the tactical restriction. If you can break the tactical restriction of one level, you will pass. If you can break the tactical restriction of one level, all the treasures stored in the sixth level will be given to you. As a spell practitioner, as long as there are enough sacrifices, I can break the tactical restriction no matter what level it is. She looked at the 2 little girls who were unscathed all the way and almost laughed out loud. With these 2 girls, she could try to break the tactical restriction, and then all the treasures in the 6th level would be hers. Ha ha ha. Fan Zisong, my good disciple, I really don't know how to thank you. If it weren't for your contribution of the flower pond, how could I get such 2 perfect sacrifices? In this way, the countercharge is only 10% of the usual, and my ability to break the tactical restriction should reach the master level. Sensing Wang Yu's scorching gaze, Su Li raised her eyebrows imperceptibly, and a smile appeared on her lips. Chapter 391. Ah! Ah! Following 2 hurried and short screams from the 2 doors, the 6th checkpoint once again entered an empty state. Bright red blood flowed along the cracks under the stone gate with bone powder. It was like mercury, without staining the ground at all. In the blink of an eye, all the blood blended into the ground, as if the tragic death of the 2 people was just an illusion. They were crushed into blood powder. Many people were horrified and woke up from the state of excitement. They finally remembered that the test level was not only an opportunity, but also a danger of death. Senior. When everyone was silent, Wang Yu stood up confidently and said to Heaven Rover with her fists cupped, "It's enough for me to pass this test. The 30% gain that I said before is still valid." After that, she no longer looked at Heaven Rover's meaningful eyes, and strode to the stone gate of the test with Jin Ying and Su Li, who looked confused. Wang Yu is clearly in Jin Dan realm, but she can be invited by Heaven Rover in person. What special ability does she have to break the tactical matrix? Old Lady Du Hua pondered, but Dongfang Yi's face changed slightly. Why did this female senior take 2 little girls in Lianqi realm to break the test? Could it be? Old lady. As soon as he was about to ask, he saw that old lady Duhua's face also changed slightly. He couldn't help but look up and saw Wang Yu and the other two enter the stone gate of the restriction. This? Dongfang Yi's eyes widened. Old lady Duhua's expression returned to calm, but her sigh sounded from the sound transmission. You want to save those 2 girls? Not to mention that others don't agree. Even now, it's too late. Dongfang Yi's face turned pale, and countless cruel scenes flashed through his mind. He clenched his fists for a long time, and finally put them down powerlessly. If I can also have the strength of Yuanying realm. At this moment, he finally realized what his father said in his childhood. As a practitioner, if you don't have enough strength, everything is in vain. After Wang Yu and the other two entered the stone gate of the restriction, they passed through an ordinary tunnel and finally came to a stone with a radius of less than 30 meters. The stone surface was engraved with complex black runes. Wang Yu glanced at it roughly, but couldn't recognize any of them. Is this the ancient restriction? As expected, it is completely different from the current restrictions. Wang Yu didn't panic at all. With a smile on her face, she looked at Su Li standing beside her, and her eyes gradually became fierce. Suddenly, she used her fingers as a sword and cut Su Li's wrist fiercely. In a split second, blood splattered across the sky, and the rich red landed on the black rune restriction. Ouch! After Su Li screamed in pain, she didn't do anything else. She let the blood flow into the inhibition and gradually filled the entire rune of the inhibition. This was the proper reaction of being enchanted. Junior sister. Jining forgot Su Li's instructions. Her face changed slightly, and she was about to rush to Su Li, but Wang Yu knocked her out and threw her aside. If it weren't for the fact that you've been rather close to me along the way, my first target would have been you. Wang Yu smiled coldly, with no expression on her face. She slowly performed the spell practice. She didn't know to what extent the enchantment given by immortal Bingshu would work, so even if Jining showed abnormalities, she didn't care much and focused on breaking the restriction. To be on the safe side, she also cast a paralysis spell on Su Li, making her body stiff and unable to move, so that she could take blood. The ancient restriction must not be underestimated. So, I will use the 3rd-grade spell. The countercharge will at most make my cultivation drop to the middle stage of Jindan realm. This loss is absolutely worth it. Wang Yu pondered and pinched out several skull marks in her hands. They were connected together like a net made of skulls, which became more and more complicated. She was concentrating on condensing the spell, so she didn't notice that Su Li, who should have been stiff and bleeding to death, suddenly moved. She took back her hand first and wiped her wrist with a finger. In the blink of an eye, the wound disappeared. Then, she turned around and stood in front of Wang Yu, looking at her with a smile. Seeming to feel the gaze, Wang Yu felt a little uncomfortable. Although she didn't want to interrupt her thoughts, she still opened her eyes to have a look. What she saw scared her out of her wits. Su Yu? Wang Yu screamed in horror, and her voice changed with fear. Why are you awake? You can move, you? Seeing the intact skin on her wrist, she couldn't help but be shocked. For a moment, the skull net became blurred and unstable, and was about to disperse. Forcibly stabilizing the spell, Wang Yu anxiously thought of a way to save her, but she heard the young girl in front of her suddenly laugh. Master, you should be very flustered now, right? I'm afraid the countercharge of the interruption of the spell is much more costly than the success of your spell. Wang Yu's pupil shrank violently, but this time she didn't scream again. After all, she was a person who had practiced for thousands of years, so she quickly recovered her calmness. While thinking, she spoke to stall for time. This Su Yu was so weird that she couldn't bring up any resistance for a while, and just wanted to escape. Your Excellency, since you even know the spell, why do you hide your identity in Danxiao Mount? What I did before did offend you, but if you had told me in advance, there would have been no such misunderstanding. Su Li's little face showed surprise when she heard the words, and her expression also eased. It seemed that she was really persuaded by Wang Yu. Wang Yu secretly breathed a sigh of relief, and the gesture was completed faster. That's right. She didn't mean to cut off the spell. The spell was also a skill to hurt people. Even if Suyu was weird and couldn't completely treat her as a sacrifice, as long as the spell was cast, Suyu would be seriously injured even if she didn't die. Thinking of this, she smiled coldly and continued to deal with Su Li on the surface. Su Li didn't seem to notice it and slowly chatted with Wang Yu. Finally, after a cup of tea's time, the gesture of the spell reached the final stage. It's done. Wang Yu was delighted and was about to pinch the last seal. Su Li's unhurried voice suddenly became cold and mocking. After talking so much, I almost forgot to remind you what the absolute premise of the spell is. Senior, you should not forget it, right? As soon as the words came out, Wang Yu's eyes suddenly widened, and her body shook violently like a sieve. How could she forget it? To cast the spell, the strength of the sacrifice must be far less than that of the caster. Otherwise, the caster would inevitably suffer a terrible backfire. Suyu had always shown that she was in Lianqi realm, but she completely ignored this detail. No. Seeing that her fingers pinched the seal due to inertia, Wang Yu let out a desperate scream, but it was too late. Boom! An absolute scale phantom emerged and flipped between Su Li and Wang Yu. In just a breath, the scale completely tilted to Su Li, as if the weird existence that weighed the sacrifice didn't need to think at all. How could there be such a big difference? Wang Yu's face was pale, and her lips trembled as she wanted to say something to Su Li. The next moment, the raging backfire hit her, and with a burst of crackling, her bones were crushed in an instant, followed by her flesh and skin. When she became a mass of minced meat, a white flame appeared out of thin air and burned everything into nothingness. Su Li watched this scene calmly, and her expression was slightly gloomy. Wang Yu's soul was clearly gone, and her bones were gone, which was similar to her fate in her previous life. Without the Black Lotus ring, where'd I be now? A slightly absurd thought flashed in her mind. Su Li shook her head, picked up Wang Yu's universe ring, and walked to the front of the inhibition. Looking at the runes of the inhibition that had completely dissolved, she smiled slightly. The backfire of the spell was equivalent to Wang Yu using herself as a sacrifice to complete the spell, and Su Li didn't need to pay any price. Su Li had thought about this ending since she guessed that Wang Yu was a spell practitioner. Crossing the inhibition and walking to the depth of the cave, Su Li saw the ownerless storage ring placed on a small stone platform at a glance. She went forward and picked it up with her psychic awareness, and was in a better mood. The feeling of getting treasures for free is not bad. The storage of celestial stones in it should be enough for me to break through to the 18th hurdle of Lianqi realm. Unfortunately, it takes time to absorb and refine them. According to Black Lotus's estimation, it will take at least a year. Thinking of this, Su Li couldn't help but laugh at her own greed. If I didn't encounter this cave of inheritance, I don't know how many people it will take to step into the 18th hurdle of Lianqi realm. It's really greedy. Putting away all the storage of the 6th level, Su Li was about to leave. Suddenly, a white portal appeared in front of her out of thin air, and the other side of the portal faintly exuded a sense of heat that was completely different from the cold cave. There seems to be a rather familiar pneuma. Su Li didn't want to enter, but after smelling this pneuma, she was slightly moved. After hesitating for a moment, she finally pressed her finger on the back of her hand, and suddenly a pattern of nightmare appeared. With a flash of black light, the shapeless nightmare appeared and stretched out in the cave with a low roar. The ability of possession was the unique attachment ability of the Nightmare clan, but they rarely used it because they were arrogant in nature, and few nightmares recognized their masters. Now, Su Li was naturally an exception. Black, take her with you. Su Li pointed at Jining, who had fainted, and the nightmare made a reluctant roar, but it still obediently swallowed Jining and put her in the nightmare space in its stomach. Although the nightmare space that accompanied it couldn't let people move freely, it was okay for Jining to sleep in it for a month or two. Swish. After swallowing Jining, the nightmare shrank back into Su Li's body. After doing all this, Su Li gathered her thoughts and stepped into the white portal without hesitation and disappeared. At the same time, Immortal Bingshu, who was waiting outside, frowned slightly. Why did the pressing method he gave to Wang Yu disappear? Could it be that this woman still had some tricks up her sleeve? Look, there is a change on the 6th stone tablet. The female practitioner just passed. A person pointed at the stone tablet and exclaimed, which immediately attracted everyone's attention. When Heaven Rover saw the 4 huge words on the stone tablet, his gentle old face showed a gloomy expression for the first time. Perfect clearance. Chapter 392. Wang Yu is missing. Someone couldn't help but go in and have a look, and immediately shouted in horror. Heaven Rover saw the exact positions of all the levels shown on the 6th stone tablet, and his face was extremely gloomy. He was fooled by a junior? She not only took away the treasure of the 6th level, but also disappeared? Sister Wang Yu is really resourceful. Senior Heaven, didn't you see through her at the beginning? Xian Meiji chuckled, and her voice was soft, but everyone in the field could hear the blame in her words. I'm not a sage. How can I not make mistakes? Heaven Rover quickly adjusted his state of mind, turned around with a smile, and glanced at Xian Meiji meaningfully, not to mention Wang Yu. I don't even know the details of you. If there are any accidents later, don't be surprised. Haha, the middle-aged practitioner, who had no sense of existence with Immortal Bingshu, suddenly laughed out loud. Senior Heaven is right. Since Wang Yu has a special way to escape, it's useless for us to investigate further. Why don't we go to see other levels? You know, there are still 2 levels that no one has passed. Yes. Immortal Bingshu thought it was reasonable, and then nodded. Instead of wasting time here, let's go to other levels. I think you have all remembered the landmarks along the way from the stone tablet. Okay. Old Lady Duhua's turbid eyes flashed. I'll take my unworthy junior to other places. Everyone, I'll say goodbye. She was still thinking about the 4th level to test the strength of the soul. Except for the 3rd level that she didn't know the content of, she was most likely to pass this level. As for Dongfang Yi, thinking of this, she glanced at Dongfang Yi, who hadn't acted rashly even if he was tempted since entering the cave. This kid's state of mind was indeed better than that of his peers, but there was nothing special about him. She didn't know why her old friend insisted that she take him with her. Seeing that old Lady Duhua was about to leave, the others also followed suit and left. Heaven Rover didn't stop them and let them go. Immortal Bingshu made up his mind to try the 1st level. He wanted to accompany the middle-aged practitioner, but found that the latter didn't want to, so he left alone. There was still a question in his mind. It was impossible for the means of the soul he had set up to be eliminated in such a short time, unless Wang Yu. Thinking about this, Bingshu's eyes flashed with worry, and he left cautiously. In less than half a day's time, everyone had left. All the treasures in the 6th stage had been taken away, so there was no reason for them to stay here. Only you are left. Heaven Rover sighed when he saw the middle-aged practitioner. Seeing this, the middle-aged cultivator hurriedly walked over and bowed respectfully. Master. This practitioner, who had also reached the Yuanying realm, actually took Heaven Wanderer as his master and had been hiding in the team to take care of him secretly. Master, I've befriended Enlightened Bingshu according to your instructions. Just now, he transmitted his voice to me and asked if he wanted to go to the 1st stage with me. Heaven Rover nodded slightly after hearing this, and his face was a little unsightly. I thought that the people to be afraid of on this trip were nothing more than him and Snow Child. I didn't expect that these 2 people didn't show any threat, but Wang Yu, he was now almost sure that Wang Yu had successfully passed the 5th level of the pseudo-holy method, and now she had passed the 6th level perfectly. Even if he could pass at least 2 levels, he was still weaker than her. This woman clearly came prepared. With a cold snort, Heaven Rover's killing intent for Wang Yu rose to the extreme. Unfortunately, he had not yet controlled the cave, so he couldn't know where the bitch had gone. From the beginning to the end, he had never doubted or even noticed the sacrifice around Wang Yu, let alone knowing that Wang Yu, whom he was cursing in his heart, had already disappeared. Go to the third level first. Heaven Rover didn't regret it for long and ordered in a deep voice. At this point, no matter how he tried to remedy it, it was useless. It was better to hold the chips in his hand first, so as to have a glimmer of hope for the inheritance. In the next few days, the second and third levels were passed one after another. But because the people were scattered, no one knew who had passed the 2 levels except for the people who passed the levels. Cough, cough, cough. In the belly of a mountain, old Lady Duhua covered her mouth and coughed violently, with a touch of red flowing down her fingers. Dongfangyi looked worried. Seeing this, he quickly handed out the medicine bowl. Old Lady Duhua took it and drank it. Her injury seemed to have calmed down a little. She took a deep breath, and fear flashed through her eyes. The day before yesterday, she went to challenge the illusion of the 4th level, but she didn't expect that all the elixirs and magic treasures to protect the soul didn't work. She struggled to come out on the 5th day, but she was seriously injured and almost died. Oh! After separating, they passed the 2 levels immediately. These people really hide better than the other. Old Lady Duhua said sarcastically to herself. Old Lady Duhua was inevitably disappointed. Yuan had died here before passing the first test, and Old One was still entangled with the first test. Could it be that their generation had passed, and the cave residence of inheritance was doomed to be unobtainable? Glancing at Dongfangyi, who was tidying up the medicine stove, Old Lady Duhua narrowed her eyes slightly and was about to speak. Suddenly, her ears moved, and her expression instantly turned cold. After a few breaths, Dongfangyi's face also changed. Someone is coming. Old Lady Duhua sneered, and there is more than one. Go out with me. Even if I die, I don't want to die in vain. Okay. Dongfangyi responded heavily, threw down the medicine stove, and helped Old Lady Duhua out of the mountain. But he saw a scholar with a sallow face covered in blood rushing toward the mountain. He is Immortal Bingshu? Dongfangyi was stunned. He didn't expect that the person was not vicious as he had imagined, but escaped here. When Immortal Bingshu saw Old Lady Duhua, he was also shocked, and a glimmer of hope rose in his heart. But when he saw Old Lady Duhua's heavy body, the glimmer of hope in his heart was immediately extinguished. Even reincarnation mirror didn't kill me. Does God want me to die? For a moment, countless figures and scenes flashed through Immortal Bingshu's mind, and finally fixed on the person who always had a gentle smile and treated him sincerely in the illusion of reincarnation. Knowing that there was no way to escape, and he even implicated Old Lady Duhua, Immortal Bingshu stopped and almost fell down. Dongfangyi hurriedly stepped forward to steady him. Looking at Dongfangyi's face, which was 80% similar to Dongfang Wushue's, Immortal Bingshu sighed in his heart, raised his head and smiled bitterly at Old Lady Duhua. I'm really sorry. I didn't expect that there would be someone here. Old Lady Duhua stared at the back of Immortal Bingshu with burning eyes, let out a hearty low laugh, and said freely, It doesn't matter. I have lived for so many years, and I have understood a lot of truths. What I should meet. I can't escape. Since I can't escape, I don't need to escape. Even if I have to risk my life, I will bite a piece of flesh from the enemy. Hearing this, Immortal Bingshu was stunned, and then grinned. I really regret that I didn't get to know you earlier. It's not too late to get to know you now. Seeing the two coming figures, Old Lady Duhua's pupils shrank, and her cane floated in her hand. She didn't forget to answer Immortal Bingshu. It turns out to be, seeing the person, Dongfangyi opened his mouth slightly in surprise, and his mind was shocked. Sure enough, it's you, Heaven Rover. Old Lady Duhua lowered her eyes slightly, wiped the blood on the corner of her mouth, and said in a loud voice. When they met again, Heaven Rover's look was no longer kind, but full of coldness and killing intent. Old Lady Duhua, I want to kill him. Why do you have to get involved? Heaven Rover said with some scruples. Although his strength was above Old Lady Duhua, if they really fought, he would still be injured. If he could persuade Old Lady Duhua to leave without bloodshed, it would be the best. Old Lady. Dongfangyi looked doubtful and couldn't help saying. Heaven Rover had shown a very good temper all the way. Maybe he had some personal grudges with Immortal Bingshu. Why should they get involved? Chapter 393. In a valley full of birds and flowers, there was a small hut. Many common elixirs were planted next to the hut, exuding a faint fragrance. Su Li was sitting quietly beside the stone table surrounded by wooden fences, meditating. The pale-faced young man sitting opposite her looked at Su Li, and he was a little nervous. Obviously, he wanted to ask Su Li for help, until he heard the slight footsteps coming from outside the valley. Su Li's eyes flashed, and she finally said, "I promise you, but you should also know that I can't give you a guarantee." The pale young man was relieved when he heard the words, as if it was the best result as long as Su Li promised. "Then I have to trouble you, Your Excellency. If the situation is irreversible as you said, then please take my son away from here safely. According to the agreement, I have recorded what happened that year here." Su Li's eyes flashed, and she took the jade slip handed by the pale young man. Then she stood up and walked silently into the house. After 2 steps, she suddenly stopped and said indifferently with her back to him, "I understand the feelings of being a parent, and I am not a holy girl. Don't call me that again." The pale young man was slightly stunned. Thinking of all the things in the illusion of reincarnation in the past, he could not help but smile bitterly. Just as Su Li entered the house, a shout of surprise came from the gate of the courtyard in the valley. "Dad, it's really you." Dongfangyi stared at the pale young man's face and couldn't help but walk quickly. The pale young man instantly stopped thinking and turned to see the 3 people outside the door. His eyes fell on the face of the young man in the middle, and a smile suddenly appeared on his cold face. Yes, he was Dongfangyi's father, Dongfang Wuxue. In the illusion of reincarnation, he incarnated as the 12th prince of Dahan country. In the real cultivation circle, he was the evildoer of Dongfang family. With his own luck, he got a good role in the illusion. The illusion of reincarnation had existed since ancient times. It was supposed to extend a world centered on the person with the highest luck in the illusion of inheritance. If someone could unify the illusion of reincarnation, the reincarnation mirror would automatically recognize him as its master. Of course, this rule was completely extinguished by the psychic mirror spirit. Under her control, it was impossible to produce such a person. Once there was a sign, it would destroy the future master in advance as it destroyed Su Li. However, even if it could not produce a real owner, the cultivation methods and treasures in the reincarnation mirror were also extremely coveted by people in the cultivation circle. In the room, Su Li thought of Dongfang Wushue's previous description and was silent for a while. She finally knew why so many people in the last life were keen to let her open the world in the reincarnation mirror. He had finally figured out a lot of things about his previous life that he had been confused about in this life. "E'er, you've grown up." Dongfang Wuxue did not forget the agreement with Su Li. He woke up after a little distraction, looked up and down at Dongfangyi, and sighed, but did not get up to touch his son. Dongfangyi didn't think so much. He came forward excitedly to hug his father, but he staggered and passed through Dongfang Wushue's body. "Shadow?" Dongfangyi's face changed immediately. He knelt nervously in front of Dongfang Wuxue and carefully observed his father's body. When he saw the beam of light penetrate Dongfang Wushue's body, his face suddenly turned pale. "Why is it a shadow? Dad, did you? Your father won't die so easily." Dongfang Wuxue didn't let him finish the second half of the sentence and scolded with a smile. Dongfangyi immediately breathed a sigh of relief. When he came to his senses, he realized that his back was soaked. If he met his father again and found that his father was dead, it would be the cruelest punishment for him. "Fellow practitioner Dongfang, it's my pleasure to meet you. I will never forget your life-saving grace." Old Lady Duhua came up and said softly. Anyway, they were out of danger, and this place was very suitable for healing. There was no need to worry about their lives for the time being. "Fellow practitioner Duhua, you are welcome." Raising his head, Dongfang Wushue's face returned to normal, and he said with a faint smile, "I also saw that you once saved my son's life along the way. We are even now." "You can see the situation in the Cave of Inheritance?" Old Lady Duhua was shocked, and subconsciously remembered that her old friend had repeatedly told her to take Dongfangyi with her. It turned out to be true. Dongfang Yi's biological father was actually in this cave. Hearing her words, Dongfang Wuxue just smiled without saying a word, but he felt bitter in his heart. If he could, he would rather give up this ability. Are you Dongfang Wuxue? Immortal Bingshu, who was covered in blood, had many scabs on his wounds, and his hair was disheveled and stuck with blood clots. He was even more embarrassed than a beggar, but his face was calm. He looked at Dongfang Wuxue and said in a deep voice, "My name is Yin Zai." Dongfang Wushue's calm look immediately changed, and his tone was not as casual as before. He said in the same deep tone, "It turns out to be Brother Yin. But Brother Yin." Yin Zai grinned and said, "Not everyone is as lucky as Brother Dongfang. Back then, I was seriously injured when I came out of that place, and I haven't been able to recover. Now, I'm struggling at death's door in the cultivation world. Brother Dongfang, I'm sorry." When Dongfang Wuxue heard this sentence, he immediately smiled meaningfully. He didn't say it explicitly, but secretly transmitted the sound. With Brother Yan's background, it should be easy to repair the damage to the foundation. Is it possible that Brother Yin betrayed his own force like me? Yin Zai's eyes narrowed slightly. Dongfang Wuxue exposed his shame, but he was also calm. He replied, "That practice is incompatible with my Taoist heart. People with different principles cannot make plans together. I have not regretted betraying my sect. And, although it is absurd, Suli did have a lot of influence on me in the illusion that year, so that I can no longer treat my master and others as my close friends. Who on earth became whose furnace in such a scheme? Haha, it's really ridiculous." Dongfang Wuxue slightly pursed his lips. "Brother Yin, you are wrong. Not everyone still has the memory of the illusion like us. Those who came out of the illusion with the life ring as a substitute only remember the practice methods and secret skills." If there was no accident in that year, Yin Zai's expression changed immediately. "So that's how it is." Dongfang Yi and Old Lady Duhua saw that Dongfang Wuxue and Yin Zai suddenly remained silent at the same time. Naturally, they knew that the two were transmitting the sound, and it seemed that the two were old acquaintances. They knew each other but didn't know each other. Old Lady Duhua had lived for too long and had a clear mind. She didn't want to inquire about the relationship between the two and directly sat aside to heal herself. Dongfang Yi sat aside worriedly, but he was worried about his father's not-solid body. After half a day, the communication between the two talents of that year came to an end. There was a smile on each of their faces, but they didn't know the meaning. Dongfang Wuxue looked at the room without a trace, and thoughts turned in his mind. Yin Zai clearly entered the cave with Su Li. I am afraid that Su Li has recognized him for a long time. Fortunately, he is not very clear about what happened in that year, and I have enough bargaining chips. However, with Yin Zai's help, I may have a greater chance. In the following period of time, Dongfang Yi and the other two stayed here to concentrate on healing. Although Yin Zai and Old Lady Duhua's injuries were serious, they were not troublesome. With the help of elixirs, they recovered to the peak state before entering the cave in just 1 month. As for Dongfang Yi, he was receiving the guidance of Dongfang Wuxue to make up for the lack of inheritance in his childhood. However, Dongfang Yi was very uneasy to learn. He always felt that his father was making arrangements for his death, and his mind became heavier. "Since you have recovered from your injuries, why don't you come over and sit down for a talk?" Dongfang Wuxue invited with a smile. Yin Zai and Old Lady Duhua naturally had no objection and sat down next to each other. For the first time in countless years, the square stone table was full. This cave was left by immortal Zhonglei. "I think you know it from the stone tablet, but..." When Dongfang Wuxue said this, his voice suddenly became low. "Half of the contents in the stone tablet are fake." "What?" Dongfang Yi was the most impatient and couldn't help exclaiming. Yin Zai and Old Lady Duhua also changed their faces slightly. They had never doubted the authenticity of the stone tablet. "Although I have a vague feeling when you enter the cave, as long as there is a sparrow, I can't feel it." Dongfang Wuxue then said a name, which made Yin Zai frown. "Who is the sparrow?" "It is the heaven rover, you know." Dongfang Wuxue looked at Yin Zai and softly threw out a shocking fact. Heaven Rover was possessed by the sparrow 100 years ago, and he was in this cave. And the person who came here with Heaven Rover 100 years ago was me. The sparrow was originally the mansion spirit of this cave, responsible for waiting for the successor of immortal Zhonglei. But because of the long time, the sparrow gave birth to its own intelligence, broke away from the shackles of the cave, and became an evil spirit. Dongfang Wushue's tone was still calm, but the fists hidden in his sleeves were unconsciously clenched. After I came here with Heaven Rover, I was caught by the sparrow. Heaven Rover was possessed by it, and my soul was stripped away by it, replacing its original position. In the small courtyard, there was a long silence. I see. Old Lady Duhua's face was pale. The truth was often far beyond imagination. A mansion spirit, who was arranged by the master to manage the cave, lived for countless years and had a disloyal mind. He even tried to break away from the concept of spirit and become a human being and become the successor of the master. Even in the ancient cultivation era, such an evil thing was definitely rare. Dongfang Wuxue continued, because of this, I can vaguely sense what happened in the cave, but I am not the real mansion spirit after all, and many things are not under my control. The sparrow stripped away my soul and wanted to make me a puppet with no consciousness, but it didn't know that I was protected by a rare treasure, and my mind was not scattered. If not, I'm afraid I can't save you by surprise. However, I appeared in front of the sparrow this time, so I'm afraid he already knows my existence. Dongfang panicked when he heard it. What should we do? Dad. Well, the sparrow. Don't worry. Chapter 394. That's good. Dongfang breathed a sigh of relief and frowned. No, if the sparrow takes control of this cave, he will definitely take you out to avoid future troubles. What should we do then? Then we won't let him get the cave. Yenzai sneered. The sparrow has schemed against everyone. If I'm not wrong, he invited us in just to use us to help him break the 6 levels, right? Yes. Dongfang Wuxue thought of the contents of the stone tablet 100 years ago and nodded gently. The iron law of the cave is that there are 6 levels. If a person fails in 2 of the levels, he will be recognized as a waste, and he will be killed if he tries again. No wonder. Yenzai's pupil shrank. I stayed in the 1st level for a long time, but I didn't see many people. It seems that almost all of them are dead. Old Lady Duhua was silent and sighed in her heart. If she hadn't been seriously injured in the 3rd level, she would have been killed instantly. Now it seemed that it was a good thing to pass the 3rd level. Dongfang Wuxue closed his eyes slightly, and all kinds of situations in the cave appeared in front of him. Not long after, he opened his eyes and said, when you came in, there were 81 people. Now, apart from you and the Sparrow Master and Servant, there are only 4 people left. 2 of them are traveling together. They are a woman and a white-haired boy in white clothes. The other one is a tall, thin, and ordinary-looking man. These 3 people are in the boundless wilderness. After they are far away from the stone tablet, the sparrow can't sense their location, so they survived. Even fellow practitioner 1 is dead. Old Lady Duhua couldn't help but feel sad. The elder surnamed Wan and Yuan were practitioners of the same generation as her. Although their relationship had never been good, after the death of these 2 people, the practitioners of Yuanying realm who were her peers were all dead. No, Dad, you clearly said that 4 people survived, but you only told the whereabouts of 3 people. Who was the other one? Dongfang couldn't help asking. Dongfang Wuxue looked at his son, smiled meaningfully, stood up and walked to the hut. You all come with me. Everyone immediately followed. When they came to the room, the light was slightly dim, but they could still clearly see a girl who looked no more than 14 or 15 years old lying on the bed. It's her. Dongfang recognized her at once. He still remembered that Su Li came to ask him about Dongfang Wuxue in the camp. This woman isn't. Old Lady Duhua frowned. She knew very well what kind of person Wang Yu was. How could she let the sacrifice go? Curse cultivators do have some ability, Dongfang Wuxue said in a deep voice. From then on, What he said was naturally a lie colluded with Su Li at that time. In the sixth trial, the woman in red used the lives of two little girls to break through the restrictive spell. She went against the natural order of the world. I used the door to save one, but the other turned into a bloody mist. It was difficult to save her. After one less sacrifice, the woman took the girl's place and turned into a bloody mist. The restrictive spell was also broken. This explanation was flawless. Not only old lady Du Hua and Dongfang Yi, but also Yin Zai, who was related to Wang Yu, believed it. Wang Yu really died in such a ridiculous way. Curse cultivation is really a trick that harms others and oneself. Originally, he wanted to learn the incantation after he controlled Wang Yu, but now, he gave up the idea. However, although I have saved this girl, Dongfang Wuxue spread out his hands helplessly, but I can't wake her up. Old lady Du Hua nodded and said, the incantation is weird and unpredictable. Since you saw that the incantation had already started, although Wang Yu reaped what she sowed, the incantation inevitably had an impact on her. If the practitioner with high cultivation was strong, he wouldn't care. But this little girl has just reached Lianqi realm. Dongfang Wuxue couldn't help but laugh in his heart. He nodded and said, I think so too. I can't leave here. This girl will die if she stays here all the time. Please take her away. No matter what the result is, there is a glimmer of hope. Dongfang Yi looked at the quiet sleeping face on the bed and remembered the picture when they first met in the camp. He was silent for a moment, then directly picked up Su Li and carried her on his back. This move almost scared his father Dongfang Wuxue to death. When did his son become so bold? He even dared to touch the body of the holy girl. Did he want to die? In his heart, the feeling of awe for Su Li was still greater than any other emotion. He didn't even dare to think about physical contact, but his son put it into practice. Looking at Su Li lying on his back and still calm face, it seemed that she was really asleep. Dongfang Wuxue was full of uneasiness, but he didn't dare to show any strange expression. He immediately talked about the plan to break the situation. The sparrow is determined to get this cave. Now the cave has already entered a closed state, and I can't open a hole for you to get out. The only way is for you to get the inheritance of this cave before the sparrow. As he said, he looked at Yin Zai. Brother Yin, this is related to my plan. Please answer truthfully. Can you pass the 5th level? Yin Zai narrowed his eyes slightly and finally nodded gently. Old lady Du Hua and Dongfang Yi were both shocked, but Dongfang Wuxue laughed and said, sure enough, I know that with your aptitude, the pseudo-holy method is nothing to you. Haha, brother Dongfang, you flatter me. Yin Zai's expression didn't change much. After a polite greeting, he couldn't help but think of the practice method taught by Mr. Li in the illusion of reincarnation. After returning to reality, he found that it was a complete low-level holy method, and the so-called Mr. Li and Immortal Master were just one person. Since Brother Yin is here, I have to change my method, and I will have a greater chance. Like this. Half a day later, Dongfang Wuxue waved his hand, and a white door appeared, leading to the dark cave. A group of 4 people waved goodbye. Dongfang Yi walked at the end reluctantly, but he had thought that he could rescue his father after this trip was successful. Finally, he gritted his teeth and stepped into the whirlpool to leave. Saint Su. Su Li, it's all up to you. Dongfang Wuxue watched the crowd disappear, and his eyes fell on the back of Dongfang Yi, praying secretly in his heart. Yin Zai might be able to cope with the real test, but in the end, he could only rely on Su Li. He saw it clearly in the 5th level. Su Li didn't spend any effort on this cave at all, and it only took her a little more than 2 days to master the pseudo-holy method. As the protagonist of the illusion of reincarnation, he knew that her talent must be above everyone else. But what he didn't know was that even with Su Li's talent in the reincarnation mirror, she couldn't achieve such an exaggerated level. Everything started from the Black Lotus Ring. After Yin Zai and others came out from Dongfang Wuxue's place, they came to a long black stone corridor. According to Dongfang Wuxue, this road led to the real center of the cave, and the purpose of the sparrow to pass the 6th level was also here. In the center, Only those who passed the 5th level could take the real successor test, such as Old Lady Duhua, could only follow Yin Zai as a bystander. No one knows the standard of passing the test, even the sparrow. It seems that I have to use my real strength, but my injury. Yin Zai frowned secretly, but just in a moment, his eyebrows stretched out. If the sparrow controlled this cave, he would either die or be a slave. With the pride in his heart, how could he be a slave to others? So, in the face of death, the old injury was nothing. Yin Zai smiled, and his pace suddenly accelerated. The old sparrow must have entered the center a long time ago. We have to hurry up. Old Lady Duhua and Dongfang Yi didn't quite understand Yin Zai's change, but they also agreed with him and rushed to the center at the fastest speed. Concentrating on the road, no one noticed that Su Li on the back of Dongfang Yi quietly opened her eyes. Her black pure eyes glanced at Yin Zai and then closed again. In such a hurry, they soon came to the end of the black stone path, a tall golden gate. However, the stone gate, which should have been closed, now had a gap for one person to walk through. Seeing this, Yin Zai sneered and said, "Most of the runes on this gate were left by the ancient times. It is difficult for us to open it, and we have to thank the old man for opening the way for us." That's right. Old Lady Duhua chuckled, and the three of them entered and disappeared one after another. Soon after, two figures, one tall and one short, also appeared in front of the gate. They were Xian Meiji and Snowchild. "Is this the real inheritance that the old man wants?" as the mansion spirit said. Xian Meiji smiled coquettishly, but her anger couldn't stop escaping from her eyes. No one would feel good being used by others, not to mention that they were not ordinary people, but the heavenly sons of cultivation of this generation. Snowchild looked indifferent and even didn't move his eyebrows, but he walked extremely fast and entered the giant gate without hesitation. Then, the practitioner surnamed Huang appeared and entered the giant gate with a gloomy face. Although he was not strong enough, he had to stop Heaven Rover in order to survive. In the small valley, Dongfang Wuxue poured himself a cup of tea made of spiritual medicine. He just looked at it without drinking it, and his eyes were burning. At this point, everyone was sent to the center according to the agreement between him and Su Li, and he could not sense the situation in the center. Next, they could only wait. Boom! On the bright rectangular stone path, the spiritual stone lamps on both sides seemed to be burning for tens of thousands of years without extinguishing. Not long after Yin Zai and others left, they heard a loud sound along the stone path. "It seems to be thunder," Dongfang Yi murmured, but Old Lady Duhua nodded and said, "Immortal Songlei, there is thunder in his name." In ancient times, the name of cultivation was not chosen randomly. Maybe the former owner of the cave really had the ability to control thunder. Thunder is the nemesis of all evil spirits. Even if the sparrow possesses Heaven Rover, it will not feel good under the thunder and lightning, and the difficulty of the test will be increased accordingly. Our chances will be greater. Yin Zai heard what Old Lady Duhua said and nodded secretly. While talking, the rectangular stone path came to an end, and a huge cave emitting light blue starlight appeared in front of everyone. Chapter 395. The extremely violent power kept twisting on the altar, as if it would burn its master as long as it rebelled a little. The sparrow stood on the altar with his face flushed. The feeling of thunder and lightning entering his body was not good. He even had a feeling that his soul was leaving his body, which showed the disadvantages of possession. "Go to hell." A roar turned into a soul spike and shot out. The sparrow was caught off guard and was pierced by the spike. An inhuman howl immediately sounded in the whole cave. It was not Yin Zai and his fellows who did it, but Xueqing Wanren, the servant who had been standing respectfully under the altar and followed the sparrow for 100 years. Yin Zai looked at this scene in astonishment, while Xueqing Wanren was livid at the moment. He looked at the sparrow on the altar with hatred in his eyes. "I should have known that my master had died long ago. You deserve to die." Xueqing was the servant of Heaven Rover, but not by virtue of the soul contract. He was tragically saved by Heaven Rover when he was a child. Although Heaven Rover had no requirements for him, he voluntarily followed him as a slave. Even as time went by, his cultivation reached unwavering realm. He did not have any disloyalty. In the past 100 years, his master suddenly became harsh to him, but he did not think too much and did not want to think too much. Until now, under the bombardment of thunder and lightning, the sparrow revealed the essence of its soul. He finally despaired. His master was really dead. Bastard! How dare you disobey me? A sharp howl came from Heaven Rover's mouth. After all, he was not a human being. He was seriously injured and enraged, so he immediately lost his mind. He pointed at Shuiqing Wanren with thunder and lightning. The thunder and lightning in the altar were immediately triggered, and a large number of electric arcs shot out along the body of Heaven Rover. In the blink of an eye, the cave was full of thunder and lightning. Oh no! The surging thunder and lightning made Old Lady Duhua's face change dramatically. Yin Zai's eyebrows twitched, and he opened a defensive shield. The thunder and lightning bombarded it, and the crackling sound was endless. After a few breaths, the shield was as thin as paper. "I'll help you too," Old Lady Duhua shouted in a low voice and slapped the ground with her hands. The power of unwavering realm gushed out, and the shield that was about to be broken was immediately thickened. But the speed of thickening still could not keep up with the speed of weakening by thunder and lightning. "I'll help too." Dongfangyi touched the shield with one hand and injected his genuine energy into it, but he could not help being frustrated. After 30 breaths, Yin Zai and others were a little pale, but Dongfangyi had fallen to the ground, panting heavily. Phew! Yin Zai took a long breath, gasped slightly, and looked at Heaven Rover, who had been electrocuted into a charred corpse on the altar. Although the evil spirit was crazy, it still had the instinct to protect itself after leaving Heaven Rover's physical body, and it took over Shangqing Rover's body for protection. Wanderer Shangqing won't be able to hold on for much longer. Furthermore, the lightning on the sacrificial altar has been triggered, and the evil spirits have already gone mad. Recognizing the situation, Yin Zai said in a low voice. Granny Duhua was about to speak, but suddenly she saw 3 figures coming to the shield together. As he, yin, and the thunder, and as the lightning. As possible. As he. What kind of thunder and lightning is this? Why is it so powerful? Shin Meiji sat on the ground awkwardly, panting violently. They didn't see the whole situation. They had no time to prepare on the way here. If the 3 of them hadn't gone together to resist the thunder and lightning, they would have died on the road. Just in time. Old Lady Duhua smiled. With 5 people taking turns, we can hold on for a long time? Yes. The practitioner surnamed Huang also said, seizing the time to restore the power of unwavering realm. Yinzai glanced at them and didn't ask much. Unsurprisingly, these people were all brought here by Dongfang Wuxue. He couldn't put his hope on himself alone. One more meant one more hope. It seemed that this was the case. Snowchild didn't seem to consume much energy. His small white palm print was on the shield, and the shield's thickness immediately increased. Yinzai suddenly felt relieved. He looked at him in surprise, but didn't speak. His attention returned to the altar. Giggle. In the boundless thunder and lightning, Heaven Rover had already been electrocuted into ashes, but Shangqing Wanren was protected by the evil spirit in a special way, unscathed. He was still struggling in his eyes, but the time of struggle was much shorter. It wouldn't take long for him to be completely possessed. We can't wait. We have to find a chance to kill this evil spirit. Yin Zai's voice was low, and the 3 newcomers had different expressions. This scene was enough for them to imagine what had happened. In the torturous waiting, everyone was trying to restore the power of unwavering realm, waiting for the opportunity, and the time of Shangqing Wanren's sobriety was getting shorter and shorter. 3 breaths, 2 breaths, 1 breath, half a breath, do it, Yin Zai shouted in a low voice, and the 5 people rushed out without hesitation. Those who could survive until here were all sensible people. If they still hid their selfishness at this moment, they really didn't want to live long. The sparrow, who was still controlling the body, opened his eyes. The whites of his eyes were pitch black, and he looked ferocious. Lowly bugs, you ruined my plan. Go to hell. He twisted the 2 fingers of his right hand, and the blue starlight in the cave was immediately activated, converging into a blue spiritual whip and lashing at Yin Zai and others like a spiritual snake. Yin Zai, who rushed to the front, immediately changed his face when he saw this. His hands turned into shadows, and he made a gesture in an instant. He shouted softly, "Inescapable net, come out!" Swish! A giant net appeared out of thin air in the nothingness, shrouding the spiritual whip. But after the contact, the spiritual whip penetrated the giant net without any hindrance and continued to swing. TSK, 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 TSK. If such a small trick could trap my soul whip, how could I have survived until now? The evil spirit laughed wildly, and Yen Zai's pupils shrank suddenly. Oh no! This spiritual whip is aimed at the soul. Be careful, everyone. As soon as he said this, Snow Child in the crowd didn't retreat, but moved forward. He opened his mouth slightly and shouted softly, "Freeze!" The spiritual whip, which had been waving rapidly, immediately froze in the air and stopped moving. The spell of words? There are still people who learn this crafty trick. Damn it! The evil spirit shouted angrily, obviously recognizing this technique. Yen Zai's heart was also slightly moved. He was also from a big sect, so he had naturally heard of this technique. The person who practiced this technique must be a man of few words, even mute. His voice could only be heard when he performed the technique. It turned out that this was the reason why Snowchild didn't speak all the way. With my cultivation, I can only hold on for 5 breaths. Hurry up. The 4 people received the slightly anxious voice transmission from Snowchild at the same time. Yen Zai came to his senses in an instant and laughed. 5 breaths, that's enough. He touched the storage ring with his finger, and a flying sword shining with cold sharpness immediately appeared in his palm. He didn't make any movement, but the flying sword shot out like lightning. It soared against the wind, and the thunder and lightning around it were also condensed on the surface of the sword. Void sword cut. In the blink of an eye, the flying sword that turned into a lightning sword crossed the body of Shang-Qing Wanren and slammed into the hard stone wall. 5 breaths were up. Snow Child sat paralyzed on the ground, looking at the spiritual whip breathlessly, but it hung down powerlessly, and then dispersed into blue stars floating above the cave. Crash! Shang-Qing Wanren's body was split in half, and his blood and internal organs were scattered on the ground. Void Sword, you are Yen Zai of Void Sword Sect who disappeared 1,000 years ago. Snow Child's voice transmission appeared in Yen Zai's awareness sea, and a trace of shock appeared on his indifferent face. Ahem! Yen Zai sat on the ground, and blood gushed out of his mouth freely. Hearing Snow Child's voice transmission, he forced himself to grin, and his expression was full of self-mockery. I don't want the name of Void Sword, but now I use Void Sword to save my life. It's ridiculous. The thunder and lightning in the nothingness gradually dissipated, and soon even mortals could receive it. Dongfang Yi came over with Su Li on his back, with indescribable excitement in his heart. The sparrow had been destroyed, and everything seemed to be settled. Next, as long as he could get the recognition of thunder and lightning, he could save his father. But at this moment, an arc that could not be captured by human eyes suddenly appeared out of thin air, and suddenly shot into the mind of the practitioner surnamed Huang, who was the most relaxed. No, fellow practitioner Huang, Xian Meiji exclaimed, but she had no time to stop it. She watched the practitioner surnamed Huang being controlled by the sparrow and rushing to the altar. At the same time, a crazy howl resounded through the cave. Damn bug, why do you block my way? It's impossible for me in this life. You will all be buried with me. The sparrow angrily pulled open the transparent barrier to isolate thunder and lightning, condensed a white flame in his hand, and threw it into the barrier. After finishing this step, the practitioner surnamed Huang fell powerlessly on the edge of the altar and became an empty shell without soul. That's the origin of its soul. Oh no, It wants to. Shin Meiji turned pale. She knew the sparrow's purpose, but it was too late to stop it. Fellow practitioner Huang was outstanding for his speed, and old lady Duhua couldn't catch up with him. Yin Zai and Snow Child, who had hidden their strength, were unable to fight again. Well, everything is over. Looking at the thunder and lightning barrier, a mass of white was constantly enlarging. Yin Zai smiled bitterly and closed his eyes. I can't believe I will die here. Snow Child bit his lips. The verbal compliance spell was powerful, but it also needed corresponding cultivation to support it. He could no longer reverse the outcome. Dad. Dongfangyi was full of unwillingness and murmured. When he was about to die, he still thought of his father's predicament. Alas, at this moment, he suddenly heard a sigh and heard the direction of the sigh. His eyes widened at once. Boom! The white light occupied everything, and everyone was full of despair. They could hear nothing but a loud bang in their ears. Only Dongfangyi struggled to hope for a miracle because of that sigh. And God really seemed to hear his prayer, or Suli heard it. The white light dissipated. Yin Zai was stunned for a moment. He looked at his original injury, and then looked around. Nothing had changed. How could it be? After the thunder and lightning went out of control, he didn't suffer any harm. Or was he dead? I'm not dead. Shin Meiji pinched her arm and felt pain. She cried and laughed. There was no seduction on her face, but a sense of young innocence. Snow Child pursed his lips, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help curling up. Old Lady Duhua also sighed and chuckled. It seemed that, as her old friend said, she could live to the end of her life. Everyone was feeling the beauty of life and hadn't come back to their senses. Only one person stared blankly at the petite figure standing on the altar, touching the empty space behind her with a blank face. Chapter 396. It seemed that a century had passed, but in fact, it was just a moment. Everyone came back to their senses and finally noticed Suli on the altar. The 5 people had different expressions, but more or less they were all shocked. It turns out that she is the one who hides the deepest. Yin Zai's calm state of mind was stirred. Suli's bone age and cultivation were in front of him. Since Dongfang Wuxue entrusted her to the present, he had never doubted Suli. Suli's action was completely unexpected. She is not afraid of thunder and lightning? We can't stand the thunder arc that the light emits. Which holy sect is this little monster? Shin Meiji's beautiful eyes widened slightly, looking at the thunder snake that was constantly moving in Suli's hand. The thunder arc was also limited to a small area by her and could not escape. All the figures of the holy sects flashed through Snow Child's mind, but none of them matched. He could only shake his head helplessly. The new generation excels the old. I am really old. If I can go out safely this time, I will quit the dispute and enjoy a happy life. Old Lady Duhua sighed bitterly. This trip to the ancient cave seemed to make her realize the reality, and she even had the idea of retiring. Dongfangyi froze for a moment, came back to his senses, hesitated for a moment, and walked to the altar. He was the only one who had talked to Suli. Although Suli showed a magical side at this moment, he was not afraid, but worried. After all, the thunder and lightning were so terrible. Don't come over. Suli turned her head and said without taking 3 steps. Her voice was still the same, ethereal like a clear spring, but her tone was not as innocent as before. Instead, it was full of indifference, the kind of indifference that could only be found in the cultivation circle for many years. Dongfangyi stopped and did not dare to go forward. He had mixed feelings and didn't know what to say for a while. Suli had no time to care about others at this moment. The thunder and lightning were very powerful. At the moment of contact, half of her body was paralyzed and she couldn't move for a while. During this time, she had no power to protect herself, so she would not let anyone get close to her, even if Dongfangyi had no malice to her. The pneuma of this thunder is not like the divine thunder of earth. Instead, it has a wet taste. Is it the divine thunder of water? Su Li tried to adapt her physical body to it, and her thoughts turned. Water conserves all things without competing. According to the attributes of the 5 elements, the attack of the divine thunder of water is on the weaker side. It's not a bad choice for me to take back the divine thunder of the 5 elements as a starting point. A bright light flashed in her eyes. The Black Lotus only mentioned the divine thunder of 5 elements to her, but he didn't mention the divine thunder of 5 elements. This meant that he was afraid that she had a way to control it. The 5 elements' divine lightning was extraordinary. Now that she had a chance to try it out, there was no reason for her to waste it. Kid, come back. She's still focused on suppressing the lightning. Don't disturb her. Old Lady Duhua's slightly gentle voice came from behind. Dongfang felt a little comforted when he heard it. He retreated to Old Lady Duhua and waited quietly. 3 days and 3 nights later, Su Li moved her hands and feet freely for a while. She finally adapted to the intensity of thunder and lightning. After this forcible quenching, she could feel that her physical body had been improved again. Now even the giant bell at the 2nd level of the outer cave was useless to her. Su Li's strength was enhanced, but she was not very happy. As expected, forcefully suppressing the lightning will not allow me to obtain this cave dwelling. She sank into deep thought as her delicate brows furrowed. She could not sense any connection between herself and the cave. By the way, the pseudo-holy method. After a while of contemplation, Su Li thought of a breakthrough and tried to run the pseudo-holy method. At the moment when the pneuma of the pseudo-holy method appeared, the thunder snake, which had been completely quiet and dormant in Su Li's body, immediately rioted. The coercion produced by the combination of the two filled the entire cave in the blink of an eye, and the 5 people present turned pale with horror. Dongfang Yi, who had poor cultivation, was directly pressed to the ground and ate a mouthful of mud. This is the pseudo-holy method? The 3rd one to pass the level is her. Sensing the familiar pneuma of the practice method, Yin Zai's mouth twitched, but he didn't feel much shock in his heart. What Su Li showed just now was enough to shock him. Now the information was not so eye-catching. Well, the thunder snake has become obedient. Although the coercion in the cave was bursting, Su Li herself couldn't feel it. She just felt that the thunder snake suddenly came alive. After contacting with the pseudo-holy method, it showed a trace of intimacy to her, and was no longer full of unwillingness and resentment as before. Does the thunder and lightning have spiritual intelligence? Su Li's eyes narrowed slightly, showing a trace of interest. She didn't know what it meant, but it didn't prevent her from distinguishing the good from the bad. Any dead thing in the cultivation circle was naturally better if it had spiritual intelligence. Young man, your talent surprises me. Accept my inheritance. An old and gentle voice suddenly sounded in her ears, leaving Su Li no time to react. Her mind was taken by it. At the same time, a strong coercion burst out from Su Li, and the 5 people waiting in the cave all blacked out and became unconscious. After Su Li's consciousness passed through a period of not too long darkness, she came to a strange space with no top or bottom. In the center of the space, there was a little white light flashing, reflecting a faint figure. It was a middle-aged man who exuded a calm atmosphere. His broad shoulders were like a mountain, shrouding the strange space, reflecting a blue shadow, and moistening things silently like the spring rain. Su Li glanced at the black spot emitting black light on her body, which represented her own thoughts. She was moved, leaned forward, and asked in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "Senior, are you a mortal Songlei?" The middle-aged man grinned and seemed to laugh. "You are very calm, and you don't seem to be afraid of me? Aren't you afraid of being trapped here forever?" Su Li smiled slightly. "If being afraid is useful..." "Ho ho!" Immortal Songlei really laughed this time, and looked at Su Li with undisguised admiration. "Junior, it seems that you are more complicated than what I see now. Are you willing to be my successor?" He went straight to the point and was very straightforward. It was not easy for him to meet a fairly good junior cultivator, and he didn't have much time, so he naturally had to seize it. "Of course." Su Li chuckled and said indifferently, "It's not a burden to have more skills. as long as you don't mind that I am a female practitioner. When it came to inheritance, Immortal Tsang Lei's expression became serious. As long as you can meet my standards, it doesn't matter whether you are a man or a woman. As he said, he shook his head. Although I never thought that the successor who inherited my mantle would be a delicate little girl after tens of thousands of years. Thunder is extremely irritable, even if it is the divine thunder of water. I think you have seen its power. Suli nodded. Her physical body was much beyond the cognition of ordinary practitioners, and even she felt it was incredible. If she met such a lucky chance in her previous life, her performance would only be as bad as Yen Zai and others, and she couldn't seize the opportunity to get the inheritance at all. Very good. Immortal Tsang Lei nodded. In this case, I will teach you the real holy method of Thunder School. Remember, this method is called Chongkong Thunder Tactics, which is the most important method of my sect. If you succeed in practicing it, you will be invincible among the thunder-controlling practitioners of the same rank. You will be honored for it. As he shouted, he pointed between Su Li's eyebrows with one finger. Countless years of experience and insights of practicing Chongkong Thunder Tactics poured into Su Li's mind. Compared to cultivating on one's own, the cultivation speed of this inheritance was countless times faster. This girl is really lucky. With my last remnant soul to teach her the practice method personally, even if she can't break through the cage in the future, she can dominate Qingshui Circle. Immortal Tsang Lei's figure became brighter, and there was more relief on his face. Finally, his own inheritance and the inheritance of Chongkong sect were not cut off. Su Li didn't feel anything, and was still immersed in understanding the practice method. She subconsciously pinched the gesture with both hands, trying to condense the first genuine energy of Tsang Lei. Immortal Tsang Lei, who was about to disappear, couldn't help but be speechless when he saw this scene. After all, it was a holy method of a sect. Even if she was an evildoer, it was impossible to condense genuine energy in just a quarter of an hour. This girl was still too young. As soon as this thought flashed in his mind, his eyes suddenly widened and showed a look of horror. This genuine energy of Tsang Lei? Looking at the thumb-sized blue lightning ball that appeared in Su Li's hands, Immortal Tsang Lei was suddenly stunned, but the shock brought to him by Su Li was obviously not over. When the blue lightning ball was sent into the pubic region along the meridians by Su Li, the genuine energy of Tsang Lei, which symbolized the supreme holy method, was immediately pressed at the bottom of the pubic region by the original black genuine energy, and there was no room for resistance. Immortal Tsang Lei, he did not hesitate to wait for tens of thousands of years, and even didn't care that the mansion spirit became his inheritor, just to wait for an excellent descendant. Now the inheritor came, but this inheritor seemed to be too excellent. Good. Immortal Tsang Lei's eyes brightened, and he looked at Su Li, who was still in meditation, like a rare treasure. The top holy methods are reduced to a foil. The greater the opportunity you have, the more impossible it is for the inheritance of my sect to be cut off. I, the 42nd generation disciple of Chongkong sect, will die without regret. Ha 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 ha. In the laughter, Immortal Tsang Lei's figure faded away, and finally disappeared completely. In the strange space, only Su Li was quietly understanding the Chongkong thunder tactics. From this moment on, there was no Immortal Tsang Lei in the world. After a long time, Su Li opened her eyes. Her starry eyes flickered for a moment, and then the light converged. Sensing the pneuma of the remnant soul fragments in the nothingness, she got up and bowed respectfully with sincere eyes. Senior, your inheritance will not be cut off. There seemed to be a response, and the remnant soul finished its last obsession, and the fragments also turned into clear air and dissipated into nothing. I don't know if there are ancient practitioners who uphold the principles now. While muttering to herself, Su Li's mind moved, and her mind went out of the space to return to her physical body.